that's right. We have a Form A for 1200 Bedford Street. 1200 Bedford Street. Nobody here for that?
Yeah, we're waiting back.
1200 Bedford Street. Come forward.
Yes.
Hi. What, are you making a proposal or something? Do you want to talk about this? Why don't you have a seat and
We're trying to do a curb cut.
Can you introduce yourself, please? And
Matt McPhail, I own 1200 Bedford Street. So we proposed the curb cut that was there to the state, and they wouldn't go for it because it's too close to Highland under the new regulations. So they made us move it down about 40 feet towards Summit. So it's the same curb cut, we just had to kick it down the road a little bit. So we're coming in at a 90-degree angle, as the state requires. So the way it's gonna be is Vinnie comes in, I come in, and we both meet in the middle on, right down the line of our property.
right here. Right here?
Yep. Yes.
What's being proposed? The triangle?
It's just there's a curb cut that's there now.
This is what I think they're
There's a
proposing.
curb cut that's there now, and it's too close to Highland. So they moved it further down the road. My entrance has 2 driveways. The state is eliminating the second driveway on the corner of Summit. So I'm only gonna have 1 driveway. 1 way in, 1 way out. So they moved it further down, so it'd be closer to my driveway in the middle of Summit and Highland. So we're all approved with the state. The state gave us the go-ahead. But we have to come in, we have to split the entrance, Vinnie and I.
Okay, so that's
So, yeah.
parcel D.
And once we get in, it'll be 12 feet wide, it'll be 24 feet wide, 12 feet on his property, 12 feet on my property. And then he'll enter his property, I'll enter my property. And it goes all the way up to the back of the lot.
Okay.
State was good with it. We met with them 3 or 4 times, and that's pretty much it.
So parcel D will be owned by who?
I don't know where you're looking, I'm sorry.
The triangle.
Vinnie, we're gonna split that. That's gonna be Vinnie's, I believe. Isn't that what's on the Mylar? Isn't that what he's proposing? We can't come in, the way we want to do it, we have to come in at a 90-degree angle. The way the state changed all their regulations. So, the one we have is fine. It works fine, they just won't let us keep it.
You own this one too?
Yes. That's 1,200, correct?
So this is all together? This is
Yes.
one. Okay.
Yep,
But it's just-
yes, I'm
it's two
sorry,
different
that's Summit
zoning
over there,
districts.
yep, and it goes all, yes, yep. So,
Just
the state,
moving the curb cut down to that triangle piece.
correct, yep, exactly what we're doing. The state told us where we could put it, there was no, they kind of gave us, this is the way it is, or it's not gonna happen.
Yep.
And if it doesn't happen, we lose the curb cut altogether. They'll go right by us. So the state, 100%, we got all the paperwork from them, so we're good to go.
any questions or anything further? Someone wish to make a motion?
Make the motion, approval not required.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're gonna stay in.
Huh? Can we sign that?
You wanna pass them down and sign them all together? How many need, Liz? How many you want, Liz? I don't want them. All of them? I'll just make a stack.
You want more than one of these signed? We have a letter from Attorney Riley regarding street trees and cancel 10-foot wide pedestrian easement in Century Estates.
Chairman, members of the board, maybe we could do the pedestrian one first,
Sure.
more straightforward. I submitted a letter to the board, Sean Riley, 500 Washington Street, representing Danica Development LLC, as a subdivision developer of Century Estates. And attached to the letter was a copy of the original subdivision plan that Jim Carafas had approved back in, I think it was 2007, and then a copy of an aerial plan. The original plan had a proposed paved pedestrian easement that cut between Lot 2 and 3, actually over Lot 3, from Cynthia Road out back towards town-owned property, actually to the edge of the town-owned property, which is the Woodsdale School property. As my letter noted, we've been preparing to try to finish the subdivision with those sidewalks and curbing and street trees and all. And in talking to the developer, and as of late, I also talked to the two neighbors, and apparently the neighbors also had a block party this past weekend, and they were bringing this up. We're proposing that we eliminate the pedestrian easement because it serves no purpose. It leads to nowhere. It leads to the middle of the woods. I think its intention was to provide a pedestrian access to Woodsdale School, but as you can see, it doesn't even connect to it. And now that Woodsdale is a 3rd and 4th grade school, any parent is not going to have their kids walk through the woods. They're going to do what I used to do when I was a kid, was walk down Blanchard Terrace, and there already is a pedestrian access road. But because it was on the original plan, we were seeking a vote from the board to terminate that and not require that pedestrian walkway. I proposed some language in the second page of my letter that I thought would take care of it, which was requesting the vote to remove and rescind the requirement to construct a pedestrian walkway in the location shown as a, quote, proposed 10-foot wide pedestrian easement on the approved Century Estates definitive subdivision plan recorded in Plan 54, page 704, and to allow Danica Development LLC to take appropriate action to terminate all reserved rights to construct or maintain the pedestrian easement. Meaning, when we sold lots 2 and 3, we said we reserved the right to build that paved walkway to the forest. Appreciate any feedback from the board, but we would need a vote in order to proceed with trying to finish the subdivision.
Members?
It makes sense to me. There must have been some other idea in mind when they were doing that. That property had been talked about, the school property had been talked about becoming other things sometime too. But yeah, I would have voted to approve it.
I have no problem saying you don't have to build it. I do have a concern about removing the easement, especially with no input from the school committee. I have no idea if they have something planned or not. And I wouldn't want to give this away without taking another look at either talking to the neighbors, talking to the school committee. So I'm perfectly fine saying you don't have to build it, but I don't want to give up that easement until we have a chance to think about it more.
Well, I can tell you I don't know if either of the neighbors are here. I told them it was going to be a long meeting, so they probably didn't come. If you would like, in the interest of time, because we're going to proceed with trying to finish things, I have no problem if you would take that vote, subject to me submitting a letter from the school committee or the school superintendent saying that they have no use for it. I have no problem doing that. As you can see from the aerial view, and actually more so from the subdivision view, it actually leads out to the property that's owned by, my eyes are going, I think it's Hendrickson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you've played baseball out there in that baseball field, you know that a lot of that is wet out there. Yeah. So,
But not having been on the board when this was approved, I don't know what the reasoning was.
yeah, and I
don't wanna-
wasn't here either. I didn't represent Carafas. So it just, so I have no problem trying to get you a letter for your file as a condition before what would happen, Mr. Collins, is if you did vote as requested, because Danica Corporation reserved the easement, we would then record a document where we would terminate the easement. But we just would not do that until I submitted that paperwork from the school department.
I don't have a problem with that. I'll make it as a motion if you want.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you. Can I get that letter? And then the second letter, again, is part of our plan to try to finish up. And again, I submitted a letter to you regarding this proposal, and I wanted to give you another visual aid. Because I'm all about visual aids. The request is, under the regulations, we're supposed to put 3 street trees on each lot within a 10-foot strip, which is essentially parallel behind the sidewalk. It's actually on each lot. It's not part of the road layout. I'm not sure which one you guys saw for that. But as my letter explains, when you take a 110-foot lot, some of them are larger, but the majority are 110 feet lot, and you take out the driveway area, and then you take out, because they're underground utilities, you now have a transformer every second lot, and you also have the fire hydrant every third or fourth lot. You don't have the space, actually, to put 3 trees. And what we're proposing is a pin oak tree, which has been recommended by at least 2 landscape professionals. The pin oak tree grows to be about 35 to 40 feet wide, about 60 feet tall. So obviously, you plant them at least 40 feet away from each other. And you want to keep them away from the driveways and away from the electrical transformers. So 2 trees will fit, whereas 3 trees won't, or they'll start growing into each other. This isn't just a cost-cutting ploy, because what we're proposing is, if we're only going to do, and we would do 3 trees on the corner lots, because they are longer lots. But in doing this, we'd be saving approximately, I think the number was around $20,000 if we did 2 trees instead of 3 trees on the majority of the lots. And I've been meeting with John Stone about some of the other details, and what we proposed was, with the money we save on the trees, we would do more pavement work on Dorsey Street. Right now, the subdivision plan requires Danica Development to stop at the intersection of Crossley Street and Dorsey Street. We would extend it about another 300 feet, 375 feet total. There's a question about it, wherever John wants us to stop. The town is scheduled to do Dorsey Street and Crossley Street and Taylor Street next year. We were trying to coordinate our pavement work with their pavement work, but fiscally they couldn't do their half this year. They'll be doing it next year. So John has signed off. He signed off on this letter, this proposal. He fully supports what we're proposing here. That, again, it's not a cost savings. It's just going to be a better final product for all of the homeowners, and will help kind of get Dorsey Street updated a little more quickly. But again, we would need a vote from the board to accept this proposal as written. We'd also look at, I should mention one thing, Parcel A is a strip of land on Murphy Street that, in our calculation, is the assumption we would plant 3 street trees there. If John suggests not to do that, because that right now is just, it's wild forest land, he may want to let it just grow in. We would, do whatever John tells us to do, but the proposal right now is to do that, to put in the 3.
I looked at it, I've been concerned about some of the developments I've been seeing lately where the trees are getting giant lollipops and they're on top of each other. And I like this tree a lot. This pin oak is a nice tree, different.
It is, and I neglected to tell you what the handout shows, but I spent a lot of time going up there and drawing where the driveways are, where the transformers are, where the hydrants are, to demonstrate where and then the second page is if you plot the trees down in the proposed locations, it looks nice, and it avoids those issues. The final places will be obviously determined by DigSafe and in coordination with John Stone.
I don't like to subtract trees. I know they're not cutting them down, but
Yeah.
numbers-wise, I understand why it doesn't work for every property to have 3 along the frontage. Do you know, generally speaking, are these houses getting any other sort of trees in their landscaping as they're being built?
That's all private properties, whatever they decide to invest for their own landscape.
Well, I mean, as a developer, you can plant trees on land.
No, we sell the lots to home builders, and so the home builders and the home buyers decide what they're gonna do with landscaping. Mr. Rosen can't dictate that. The only area that we can dictate is in the tree easement.
A suggestion for the board might be, as we consider redoing some of our zoning bylaws, is to move away from this, trees have to be within 10 feet of the frontage, because situations like this, it doesn't work. But maybe the third tree is somewhere else in the front yard, or along the border, the property border, so that you still have those trees, but they don't have to be right next to each other all along the sidewalk. Future solution, future idea. Too late for this, I understand. Yeah, I wouldn't make this something I'd want to do for every development, but for this one, it makes sense as to how it's laid out. I just want to say that for the record, in case some other developer says, well, you did it for this one, why can't you do it for mine? But this one makes sense of what they're looking to do. There's a benefit the town's getting back from it as well. So that's why I'll be excited with that.
Yeah, I always, me on granite curbs and stuff like that, I never, someone comes with us with a big curb and stuff like that, but, no, I mean, I've read this, and, what the developer is proposing to do, to me, this makes sense to allow this in this case. I mean, he's working with the town, and I hear what Rick is saying about the trees and stuff like that, something we need to look at. But, I'm a really traditional guy. I like to see granite curbs, I like to see trees, I like to see
We'll
stuff.
talk about that at another meeting.
Do you know the size of the trees he's gonna plant?
Well, by regulation, they have to be, I want to say 3 inches. 3 inches at,
Is he going to
3 inches above the ground, and then,
minimum, or is he gonna plant bigger ones, because he's eliminated a tree?
oh no, see, one of the trees we were looking at was a typical pear tree.
Yeah.
But a pear tree gets to be about, correct me if I'm wrong,
Right.
20 to 25 feet
Yeah,
wide. The pin oak is a bigger tree.
there's confusion on pear trees. It's Bradford pears and Kellerani pears, and quite frankly, they last 20 years, and then they need to be used for firewood. That's the problem with it. So, and I know that's something I think we need to bring up later on with Dan, on us saying what kind of trees should be in there, or having a vote on that, because certainly at the time they were great, and I notice there's some more being planted in Abington right now, and it's a poor choice of trees. It's great for 20 years, but after that it gets to be a problem.
So I guess the further question is, you're eliminating a tree, how long do you think before they look decent?
Well, it's going to take a few years, no question about it.
That's,
But, you know, the
that's
best
my
time to plant a
question, whether
tree-
or not he was gonna do a little bigger tree, because he was
Well,
getting rid of.
Yes, it is a larger tree, and it is classified as a faster growing tree.
The only thing you can find fault with this is the fact that you were planting all the same trees in a subdivision.
That was my next
And if
question.
at some point you have a problem with whatever it is, and then you lose all the trees in that subdivision. So a variety of trees sometimes would be better than having everything all the same.
Is that something you could do, Sean, is get a variety of trees in it?
We have beat this like a dead horse. These are all the trees. I know too much about street trees, okay? We looked at Japanese tree lilacs, Cleveland Slovak pears, imperial honey locust, the Amer maple. I reviewed the street tree requirements in about 6 South Shore towns. Most of them do not list what type of tree. Some of them have 2 trees per lot, some say 3 trees per lot. One town does have a pick from this selection of 12 trees. Only one town that I found required 2 different species for the reasons. But, as I said, at least two of our landscape professionals mentioned the pin oak, because we didn't want to do the pear tree, like everybody does.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the pin oak is, and I don't know if I have a copy of it here, it's described as a fast-growing tree, a hardy tree that is good for, as a street tree. It obviously provides color in the fall, and it also provides shade so the front yards don't burn. And I didn't bring my pin oak, I brought every other version of tree there is.
Well, just to follow up on Wayne, if we could find a tree that has the attributes of the pin oak, just to have some variety.
Yeah.
You don't have to have 6 different kinds here, but at least a couple of different kinds.
That's the pin oak right there.
I think the board,
Can I see it?
I can speak for everyone, but I think if you had a couple of different kinds of trees at least, it would prevent, the same species from dying out potentially.
Can I ask that you implement that policy at your next subdivision? Because our timing is tight now, because we'd like to get the trees in before we do the top coat. Because we don't want to put the top coat and then bring in heavy trucks and machinery and start digging, plus we need to do dig safe. I agree with you, Bruce, but I think we need to have, perhaps the board might consider a list of trees to select from in the future. And maybe a waiver of granite curbing, but that's another meeting.
No, we don't. If I was chairing the meeting, you wouldn't get.
All right.
All right, I want to make a motion on that.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Can we take up that boundary thing, or is that something that,
Yeah.
I think you can have a
yeah, on the,
Mention that?
direction.
right, on the,
Did you
speak
get
on the
one of these,
boundary.
Liz?
Yeah.
There's one, I'm sorry?
One? I'm just asking if you got one.
An issue's come up with Veterans Place, and it's gonna also happen here at Century Estates. Mr. Egan, who owns Veterans Estates, one of the requirements, again, for our regulations, is to put 5-inch by 5-inch granite bounds on street turns, what am I looking for, arcs, easement areas, not the lot markers are different, but on the bounds. Problem is, we can't find 5-by-5 granite posts. Companies don't fabricate them anymore, and I think Patrick tried to find them too. Can't find them. So a lot of towns require just the concrete bounds, which we can do that. Everybody sells the concrete bounds. You could go down to a 4-by-4 granite bound, but the 5-by-5 concrete bound seems to be the most common use, right? So that would, you can't take a vote on this tonight because we couldn't get it onto your agenda, but if you could kind of give me an inclination where you're leaning, because if you were to say, no, we want the 5-by-5 granite bounds, then we have to special order them. And again, we want to get those bounds in, we have to get the bounds in before we put the final pavement in, so we don't have dig safe marks on the new pavement.
There's no question in my mind that the cast just does not work, and eventually it starts breaking down. And I would suggest that we go with a four square concrete, 4 square granite.
How far does it stick up out of the ground? How far is it sticking up out of the ground?
It's probably
Flush,
Flush.
especially if they're right at the back edge of a sidewalk, they need to be flush so that they're not tripping hazard.
And these, again, are not on every property line. These are where a straight road starts to bend, you mark where it starts to curve. And you also, if there's a, let's say, a drainage easement, there might be a bound, 10 feet into the lot line, so you know that's where it starts. You guys are in different towns. What do you see?
Pretty much every town we're working in now is all concrete bounds, have been for quite a while. You guys are really the last ones requiring granite everywhere.
We should require hickory.
Middleborough has a requirement, I believe, for granite bounds, but only at the street entrance, first the bounds, everything else is concrete. And speaking as a surveyor, and I think a couple of the guys in the audience might agree with me, we love concrete bounds because we can actually find them. We can go over the magnetic locator, we can find them. You can't do that with granite.
Why is there metal around the concrete bounds?
Yeah, there's reinforcement
It's
bar.
rebar.
Is this currently the requirement that's spelled out in our bylaws?
Subdivision regulations.
So something we need to update?
Yeah. But for right now, I would need a waiver. I know you can't take that vote, but if there was an inclination, we would like to order them. Because as we mentioned, these have to be dug in place, and we don't want to put the top coat down and then have dig safe spray on the top coat.
I'll make the motion, I'll make the motion to place on our next agenda the issue of allowing 4-by-4 concrete or granite bounds for subdivisions. So they'll place it on our agenda for the next meeting.
All right, you'll have to wait till another month.
So that's fine. As long as we know we don't have to get the 5-by-5 granite, that would be a problem. Okay, thanks.
Can I ask another question on the concrete? Probably Patrick. Do you notice they're standing up or no?
Yeah, I mean, they last, I mean,
Usually the concrete breaks down. I agree with Wayne, the granite's probably a lot
oh, the granite.
sturdier, but if you can't find them,
I have concrete in front of my house.
you
Granite
can't
is
find
road,
them.
but,
There's an easement marker there from
I mean,
1970.
I found concrete bounds, and even a lot of them that don't have reinforcement bar in that are 40, 50 years old and still intact. Again, the only part of the bound that's exposed is the very top of the bound.
Right.
They're 3 feet deep typically. Thanks for your time.
Okay, request for a hearing on retail marijuana application.
I said I'll go anyway.
Here you go.
I stay up here.
We have, both of the applicants have received, have signed their host community agreements with the town. My client will be ready to proceed in the very near future. I don't know the status of the second store. And I guess the question is, I think the board was inclined, last time we discussed about having this not on your regular meeting, which you may decide if you want to do that. I was going to suggest if the board has a date in November or early December, or we're kind of open. I just thought we should talk about it because then that will dictate when things have to be published and filed.
Our November meeting is November 4th.
Right. Which we're happy to do it that night, but if the board would want to do it on a separate night, we're happy to do that.
So this meeting for September 18th,
That's part of the state regulations. You have to have a community meeting with the neighbors
so you're just looking for the public hearing for the site plan review?
and a special permit.
A special
You have to do. Both of those proposals will have to have public hearings with the planning board.
Well, I guess it depends on what the planning board agenda is for next month.
I'll know that
If
tomorrow.
Summer Street's on it, then that, we'd have to have separate nights.
You're looking for November, not October, right?
It's too late to file for October anyhow. Yeah, it's too late. So I would say either November or December would probably be most appropriate. You
I would
have,
do December on a
November
regular
4th is,
meeting.
November 4th is that date for a regular meeting.
and I think December 2nd is your December meeting, is that
I
right?
don't think we have a lot of other things other than that one road that one,
I would hold on a regular meeting.
what's that?
I would hold it on a regular meeting.
Yeah.
It's probably not gonna go through the first meeting, so if there's a problem, we can always have another
Right.
separate meeting.
So November 1st, November 4th.
November 4th.
I don't know, I would be willing to go to December, but
For
I guess
November.
it's the applicant.
Trying to think what we're at. Is it the site
Could you have it ready by November?
You're gonna be ready by
Yeah, we're
November.
almost ready right now, so,
Like another month to file.
yeah, right. And, well, yeah, and I guess, and if we're not ready, I'll let you know, we won't file.
And then
And
we
I'll
could
talk
go-
to you at October,
We could go to
Next week.
December.
yeah, right.
And in the meantime, they would have done their town
Community
hall,
meeting.
basic
Yep.
community meeting. Okay,
Right,
good.
So that would be November 4th.
okay.
Thank you.
That's what we'll line up, and I'll tell you if we can't make that
I mean,
meeting.
the question was whether we're having a separate meeting or not, so November or December is
Yeah, we'll
when you file it.
shoot for that regular meeting.
Request for release, interest on surety held Eagle Estates, McHugh Circle.
I don't think I gave you a copy. You want to do that?
I don't think so.
I'm going to request that we table this until we hear an update from the applicant on the work that we required him to do, that he has not done yet in that area. I'm going to make a motion.
Motion made.
Second.
I guess, I'll second it, but Bruce seconded it, but the discussion
Discussion.
afterward.
Discussion.
Is that for Cube,
Yes.
Yes,
Crabtree?
yes.
I was supposed to meet with Jim today with his engineer, but was rescheduled. We'll be meeting on Monday to go over the punch list.
So he's looking to redo it, to finish it? That was gonna be my next question. I know I asked quite a while ago to give him a push to redo it, and whether or not, I mean, it's been since 2002, maybe, 2003, this thing hasn't been finished.
More importantly, I think we issued his permit almost a year ago, and we haven't seen any action, so.
Hopefully yeah.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Did we skip over 0 Rockland Street?
No, that's,
It's on here. Is there anyone here from Zero Rockland Street?
Yes.
Yes. Please come forward. Yeah.
John Riley, 5 Washington Street, representing Lee and Mario Mann. Sorry. I was just asked to come, and I know you're not going to be able to read this right now, but just for your file, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Question, I guess there was a question about, does this trigger the, it's called the permit to fill bylaw? And essentially, this letter is my response to say, no, I don't believe it does. And the reason is, there's another bylaw in town that I believe applies, which is the chapter 1, permit to fill is chapter 49 in the general bylaws, not the zoning bylaws, the general bylaws. Chapter 134, which is on the top of page 2 of my letter, is the soil removal bylaw, which says that, essentially, it says no person can remove any soil or loam from the premises, ... except, and I highlighted this, except when incidental to and reasonably required in connection with the construction of a legal or approved use or structure or an approved subdivision. So the Manns have an approved structure. They have an approved permit to put in the foundation. So given that this has been approved by the town, I would argue, and I propose, and it's always been the case, that we're allowed to remove, basically to put in the foundation, you have to dig a hole. And under building code requirements, you have to remove the unsuitables, meaning the unsuitable soils, meaning any sort of peat, any sort of ledge, any sort of stumps, that has to get trucked out. And then obviously, it has to be replaced and backfilled. And when you backfill it, as a former building inspector and architect would know, it has to be with clean fill, gravel. Talking to the Manns, they have actually removed more unsuitable than clean stuff that they brought in. So there hasn't been any extra added there. There's actually a net reduction of material. So I don't think this triggers the permit to fill, because we're not filling the hole. I think the whole intent of that bylaw right now is, if you were to bring in fill and alter the topography of your land, that all of a sudden the stormwater starts draining into your neighbor's land, that's a problem. You need to have a hearing to make sure it's not going to happen, or that it should be altered. I went into and researched the history of this permit to fill bylaw, which this board is very much aware of. It has been changed 3 times in the last 5 years, because it's been causing more problems than solving problems. Ironically, this permit to fill is under the landfill section of our bylaw, right above the compost section. In 2014, the word landfill material was suddenly changed to fill material. And in the original bylaw in 1992, and all this research is attached to my letter for your review later when you can't sleep at night. But in 1992, it said you can't dump more than 100 yards of landfill material without a permit by the Board of Selectmen. And then in 2006, it was the same thing, landfill material without a permit by the Board of Selectmen. And this, again, is under the dumping section under the landfill. And then in 2012, it was just some wording was changed, but it was landfill material. And then in 2014, it became fill material under the same title of landfill material. And then it said, but it now described fill material as any debris, refuse, sand, gravel, or other types of earth or materials of any kind. Then it got changed again and added loam to it. I remember there was it was the selectmen issued the permit, then they wanted you guys to do it, the planning board did it, and then you guys changed it again last year to try to tighten it up. It has been a mess, and it went from basically, original intent was to prevent private landfills, because for those of you who are old enough, you used to have to bring your trash to the dump on Groveland Street, the town landfill, and that's what this bylaw was dealing with. And now it has suddenly been morphed into what it is today, and it's causing problems. So we had to put exceptions in, which we recently did in, I think, 2016 and 19, where it said, this won't apply to any town project, because if they want to redo a field, they're not going to have a public hearing so that they can put loam on a field. It's not going to apply to a project that this board approves through site plan review or subdivision approval, because you guys already do the topography and the drainage, so it shouldn't be an issue to build it out. And in this case, this is a single-family home. So it is an allowed structure, it's a permitted structure, and under chapter 134, they're allowed to remove the soil because it's pursuant to a permit. So I don't believe that this permit to fill a public hearing is not required. He has I think the foundation's actually already in with a permit from Marshall. He's been to Conservation Commission, and he's going to zoning. So, again, the history of the bylaw is there. You may want to revisit this bylaw, because I think it's going to be visiting you in a number of occasions.
Well, it's been changed to some degree, because it's been changed from 100 yards to 250 yards, which
Right.
will eliminate a lot of that problem.
Yes.
Even 250 yards is, an average lot. They're doing a lot. It's not a lot of fill.
No, and the Mans did estimate that they have removed approximately 230 yards. They removed 230, they brought in less. So they still don't trigger it for that reason.
And that was approved by the Attorney General's office? Not yet. It still hasn't been approved. That's one of the other problems.
It was approved by town meeting.
Right, but it hasn't been
Still
approved.
pending?
I would agree, in the normal building of a house, to remove and replace is, I don't think is the intent of the fill bylaw. Maybe regrading
Yeah.
and bringing in excess fill is something.
Yeah, and there's disparity in it too. I mean, if I can see if you own a 20,000 square foot lot and you bring in 150 yards, that's one thing. If I own a 3-acre lot and I bring in 150 yards, it has much less of an impact, but it still has the same threshold.
It's still, how are you piling it? You're piling it near the edge, you know.
Exactly, so I think we need a real serious review and rewrite of this bylaw to get whatever it is we're trying. And again, it's under landfill and compost right now, so it's been hijacked, basically.
Yeah, it's the intention of what you're going to do with the soil.
Yeah.
All right, that's the whole idea. I mean, even right now, we don't know what their intention is. They're filling it in, but if they change the grade and suddenly the water is going off to their neighbor's house as they filled it in, that's where an issue would come in. Of course, I think at that
Right.
point, the building inspector would probably have gotten involved.
Yeah, right.
Well, clearly, clarification, because you say we've been around, and landfills and stuff, and this is a big issue.
Yeah.
We have dealt with this as a board many times. So, clearly in any rewrite of zoning bylaws and stuff like that, hopefully this will be clarified and made clear, so, because we're gonna have a hell of a time explaining this to town meeting.
Yeah, and the tricky thing is, this is a general bylaw.
Yeah.
But it still can be amended and updated. It's just, when they changed the word from landfill to fill and expanded the definition, and like I said, if you wanted to top dress your backyard, and it says this in my letter, you might trigger the need for a public hearing now. Yeah. So, for that reason, I don't believe that the public hearing is required for this project.
I'd agree.
Anybody have a problem with that?
No, I'd agree.
I don't have a problem with this project. I think one of the other things this bylaw does is when we have large projects, the argument or the complaint we hear more from neighbors is the truck traffic going in and off the site, dumping stuff on the road as they turn in and off, the noise, the mud in the roadway, and that this is another way to say, hey, if you're going to be bringing 10, 15 trucks in here, how are you going to be doing it? Are you going to clean up after yourselves? So there's that sort of stuff as well that helps us police if this does become a problem. I don't know if there was a reason why it changed from landfills to fill, but I mean, I think we need something on the books.
I agree with you.
It may
Rick,
not
I
be
agree.
perfect.
No, I agree, and typically when there's a site plan approval or a subdivision approval, there are some usually provisions in there for operation and maintenance and cleaning things, just like you did. Where this kicks in is where you have an existing property, and then for whatever reason, the landowner, whether it's residential or commercial, wants to fill in the backyard. Okay, we need some sort of threshold where, all right, you need to notify your neighbors. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Because this might be a nuisance bylaw, but it's a nuisance until it's your neighbor that's
Right.
trying to fill something in, and then it's helpful.
Fine, thank you. And then, you have 863 Brockton Avenue compaction test?
I do, sorry. We haven't had a meeting in over a month, so. Well, do we need a vote to say that there is no hearing needed for that Brockton Street? Does that be
No,
appropriate?
I don't,
What are we talking about?
Back to this, the man, do we need a vote to say no?
I think it's been,
Okay,
It's been given to us, and we
Okay.
accepted.
Provided that's what it is, just.
yeah.
Is there any
Foundation.
comment from, is anyone here else to talk about it?
Is there anyone here to speak on that subject?
All right, then 863 Brockton Avenue is the Meadow Glen condominium down near the Brockton line. It's 3 buildings, and, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the conditions was to have compaction tests done for the buildings, because part of the property was fill back in the day. There was a compaction report submitted to you when the front building was put in. I think you probably have a copy of that. And then there was a note where the compaction tester company, the engineering company, said that it had been pouring rain for the previous day, so they weren't able to do the compaction test out towards the rear. Fine. When it came time to put in the foundation for the second and third building out towards the rear, the building department informed the contractors that no more compaction tests would be necessary. It was his jurisdiction to determine if the foundation and suitable materials were brought in, whether the unsuitables were excavated, whether it was compacted, and whether appropriate materials were put in, which he did agree. He inspected the foundation, signed off on the foundation, and signed off on the building permits. That was at the direction of the building department. I think the quandary here is, your letter said, get another compaction report. Our problem was the permitting authority said, you don't need it, I have inspected it, go forward.
Something
So-
gotten out of order? Because it sounds like, we asked for the compaction report, then came the comments from the building inspector, and I thought it was a done deal. Because
No, no.
I commented on it. Code is very plain. Like, stuff could be made of marshmallow.
Yep.
They have to dig down till they reach undisturbed
Virgin soil, right.
Right, so.
Which they did do, and the building inspector, and I think the assistant building inspector also inspected it and saw that, and then it's then compacted in 1-foot lifts, coming back up with clean gravel, which all was inspected, and the footings, the foundation, and the building.
I think the planning board was concerned about the fact that it was filled land, and that we wanted to make sure that that was done. And we did get a letter from the building department saying that it was their jurisdiction. However, I think it put us in the position of saying, hey, we want this looked at under those circumstances, and bring it to the attention of the building inspector, which we obviously did. And in the first situation, I guess it was done, and then probably as the land went back out, they probably got to ground level, original, and it wasn't fill anymore. So I guess that's where we stand. I think as far as the planning board's concerned, we have fulfilled our obligation. We certainly notified the building department.
Well, the one thing too about the compaction reports is there's, I don't know where it is, but there's no conclusion to it. It just says where they hit water in 1 of 4 places, and he's gonna fill it up with gravel. It doesn't say that's the solution, or, now you got another problem, he's filling it up with gravel. It wasn't much to make out of the report. Because how you solve it is, from that point, is what's important.
I think moving forward, we have to have some sort of coordination and cooperation between the building department if this issue arises, because we were told in no uncertain terms that it was their decision and it was their responsibility to inspect, which is what we did. So I don't want you to
I think
think...
that's true. I think that's true.
I just don't want you to think that the developer tried to shirk the responsibility, tried to avoid it. He was told this way, and that's why there's no follow-up to that. Okay?
Any other questions of the board?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Liz, are we supposed to do Deanne somewhere in here? Is that on here?
This is when it's your turn.
Even though we have the
Sign.
information, we're not doing that one tonight, right? Okay. Public hearing notice, the Abington Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, September 12th, 2019, at 6:05 PM at the Town Hall, 500 Glenowitz Way, Abington, on the petition of Michael Bonami, 34 Harrison Avenue, Abington, Mass. 02351, for a special permit to construct a single-family home and allow in all residential use in the Central Business District, CBD, under the Abington zoning bylaw, section 17537. The property is located on the Surface Maps 53, lot 160, Plans may be viewed at the Town Clerk's Office, Wayne P. Smith, Chairman, August 29th and September 5th, 2019, in the Brockton Enterprise.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Ronald Whitney. It's a pleasure to be here to represent Michael Bonomi before your board. I think this is a fairly straightforward case, and on first blush, at least my first blush, it looks fairly straightforward. The history of this property is 34 Harrison Avenue. It's right next to the Abington Bank. And the property consists currently of a three-family house that's set to the rear of the property. Back in 2016, it also consisted of a single-family house that was on the front of the property, very close to the street. There are virtually no setbacks in the Central Business District from the street and the sidewalk. And so this house was sitting there, and it burnt down in August of 2016. At the time, Mr. Bonomi did not own the property, was owned under a trust from some folks that lived in Hanover. So the house burnt down, the prior owners came before your board, and in June of 2017 were granted a special permit to replace the house with a two-family, so it was a two-family with 2 bedrooms in each unit. And so Mr. Bonomi bought the property with that special permit in place, and so he was getting things together over the year 2018 to prepare to go forward with the plan to build that two-family. And in looking at it, he decided that it would be best if he replaced that one family that was there with another one family. So your board did give the permit for the two-family under 175, section 38, 3. Mr. Bonomi took that permit to the building inspector in June. Was it June?
Yes.
June, and asked that a permit issue to go forward with construction, but he changed the two-family to a single-family. And the building inspector, perhaps rightfully said, well, you got a permit, special permit to build a two-family, now you're proposing a single-family, so I think you should go back before the planning board, so here we are. Your board did graciously give Mr. Bonomi an extension of that special permit because, as I say, it was granted in June of 2017, so it would expire by its terms in June of 2019. And in March, your board gave Mr. Bonomi an extension for 6 months on that permit. So in essence, we're just asking if the board would give permission to build a single-family house where a two-family was originally approved under the special permit that is held by Mr. Bonomi.
And it was originally a single-family house.
It was originally a single, the permit went to a 2, and now Mr. Bonomi would like to go back to a 1. He's got a couple of elevations if you'd like to see them. Up there.
Is it the same size?
Yeah, exact same footprint, yeah,
I think we're all pretty familiar with that site.
yeah.
Is the building proposed closer to the street? It's not 10 feet off the street now.
No, it's just as it was, as was approved in your prior permit.
So like the
Which
same
is-
footprint as the single-family that was there before.
Same footprint in the same location, exactly, yeah.
Is there a,
That's the elevation.
is there a front door facing Harrison Avenue, or is the front door facing the, I guess, parking area?
It's facing the post office.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that, the house was there before. The door was facing the post office, as I recall the layout of it. Didn't have a front door right on the street, the old house.
No, it
It
had
was
a,
it was like a porch that on the side of the house and the door was there.
it
I
actually
don't
had an
recall
old,
the house.
I was just calling up in Google, the house is still there in Google.
Oh, yeah.
And the right-hand side, there was a recessed porch with a door. And the left-hand side, there was a back door, probably to a kitchen. The one thing about it, though, is that the 3 houses in a row are all similarly built. And you don't have a lot of room in this, but you're proposing this one-story house, and it's turned sideways on the property facing towards the post office. And the floor plans also show that the bedrooms are on the street side, and that the living room's on the back side where the parking is. you may want to consider flipping your floor plan so that your bedrooms aren't, that's what they look like in the plans. My only concern was just the character, staying in character with everything else there. You had a question now? No?
I just wanted to know if the footprint of the house is gonna be similar to the one that was there before. It was a single level house.
Exactly the same. I
It's a very
understand.
small lot with the apartment house behind it, and that,
Yeah.
you know, again, it's right next to the post office. We've lived in this town all our lives, so we're pretty familiar with the house that was there before.
Yeah.
Right now, is there any separation or demarcation between your property and basically the pavement that goes right up to the post office? It looks like it's just a big sheet of pavement.
It's just asphalt, and then there's like a pea stone.
Okay. Are there any plans to put any sort of fencing or any sort of barrier between the two property lines?
Not on that side, if anything, on the other side. There's a fence, an existing fence all the way around,
Okay.
but not on the post office side.
Okay.
So it'll just be asphalt from your house.
It would be the same way it is now. It would be the same way it is now.
Are the parking spaces marked off anyway?
No, but they're on that plan.
Okay.
They will be marked up.
Yeah, I
They
will
will be.
suggest marking them off.
Yep.
I mean, ideally, I'd love to see a fence there to break up the asphalt and just make it a little
They
bit
could
more
put a
curb
could put a fence there.
However, that has to work. I know you've been here before, and I know we've given you an approval, so I'm not trying to bust your chops or anything. I guess if there's a way to make sure that, you know, please put shutters on the windows and
Yeah, yeah.
other little things.
It'll be
just
nice.
to- yeah.
We're gonna see that lot occupied. I think we've been waiting a long time for something to be built on
Yeah.
that lot.
Yeah, he is.
We have a letter from Marshall Adams, Inspector of Buildings. The Building Department has reviewed your request for information regarding the planning board hearing scheduled for September 12, 2019, and has the following comment. 3436 Harrison Avenue. In my opinion, certain part of the application was not applied for. As the grandfathered structure status has lapsed, the right side setback does not meet the minimum yard depth of 10 feet, and per zoning bylaw 17529, nor was it applied for. It should be made aware that the building department will require the applicant to supply a maximum lot coverage calculation for the lot. Thank you, Marshall Adams.
So,
He's saying the grandfather is out, but he's asking for something different.
He's saying the
grandfather's out, but-
grandfather structure status has lapsed, the right side setback does not, because of the time.
So now they've gotta go by the current standards, because the grandfather's gone.
The zoning bylaw requires a 10-foot setback, but the zoning bylaw also speaks to special permits, and in granting a special permit, this board can vary from the dimensional requirements set forth in the zoning bylaw. And so it would be my suggestion to the board that the board approve the plan previously with a 5-foot 6-inch setback, and impliedly in approving that plan, approve that setback. And so I would suggest, and we had this conversation with Mr. Marshall Adams, and I suggested that that would be the case, and I thought that he was on board with it, but.
Yeah, this letter was
appears that he-
August 27th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My conversation with him was before that date.
Attorney Whitman, could you make this project work if you had to do this requirement that the building inspector is asking?
Well, just as a backup plan, we brought another plan with the 10-foot setback. We prefer not to go with the 10-foot setback because it crowds as you're looking at it, crowds the left side and the parking area a little bit more than we wish to, but I actually do have a plan here if the board was.
I'm more concerned that if he makes the 10-foot setback with the existing house, then the place starts getting very critical. You have post office parking, plowing, barrels on the street for picking up trash and everything else. I don't know, it just seems that we'll be crowding the driveway so much for plowing.
Well, they're gonna have to give them a variance.
This is a plan that shows the 10-foot setback. It's substantially the same plan. All we did was move the building over 4.5 feet.
Does that trigger any other permit needs, if you're moving the foundation or not building in the existing foundation?
Not to my knowledge, no.
There's no foundation there now, it's a big.
No.
There is no foundation.
The foundation's
Yeah.
gone.
I think that's for zoning to determine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
The
they
planning board
set up-
can grant you a non-residential use, but they
Yeah.
can, the zoning bylaw speaks, but the zoning board will give you one to grant
Dimensional
dimensional.
relief. I hear you, Liz, except that if you look at the zoning bylaw, it says that the planning board, the special permit granting authority can vary from the dimensional requirements.
But he didn't apply for that. He only applied for the non-residential use. So you could go back and do that specifically for that. Or we
Try to
could
bust
reach out
your
to
chops,
town,
but-
or we could reach out to town council and maybe they could come up with.
Well, I think what Mr. Bonomi would be inclined to do would be to go forward with the plan that shows the 10-foot setback, which obviates that problem.
If that's what you want to do, sir, to me, I would go along with that, because that satisfies the, I'm sorry that you couldn't get your project in before the grandfather and expired, but these are the current rules and regulations, and you were smart, you went to the trouble and prepared the plan to deal with that. So, I mean, it would be my inclination to approve the plan with this 10-foot setback.
But I don't think you guys are approving the plan, you're only granting, you're only approving the use.
Approving the use.
You're
Approving the use.
You're not approving a plan.
Does that
No,
change the
approving the
driveway width greatly? Jeff, you looking at that plan?
Well, what's deceiving is the.
Looks like 19.2 feet right now with the way it is. What's it after, if you're pulling it 5 feet, would be minus 5 feet?
Want to see this one?
Yeah, that's partially my problem, is making that driveway a lot smaller.
You show parallel parking, but actually people diagonally park up against the post office.
Yeah, people from the post office park there, but it's actually my property.
Well, they park there.
I think once you get a house there, hopefully there won't be parking.
Right.
If I read from your bylaws with respect to the 5.6 versus the 10, it says that a special permit is not a variance, but may include a variance of dimensional and similar requirements incidental to the special permit. So the request is for a special permit. In the special permit grant, you can grant a variance from the dimensional requirements according to your own bylaw.
But all you asked for was us to approve all residential use. You didn't ask for.
What we asked for, Bob, is a special permit to,
For all residential use. Isn't that the way it was presented? You didn't ask for changing the setbacks. I would go along with this one. I like it better because you're closing up the driveway. If you can convince Marshall that, I don't know the answer. I think because you just asked for the all residential use.
well, what we asked for was a special permit. And your rules say that pursuant to the issuance of a special permit, you can grant a variance from the dimensional requirements. It's right here in section.
So the way you asked it was just for a special permit. It wasn't a special permit for an all residential use? Is that the way it was presented, Liz?
Check the box.
Special permit to make a single family out of it rather than a two-family.
Yeah.
Can I say something, Ron?
Yeah,
It's very straightforward.
Single
It's
to
a-
a-
It's a special permit request to change the special permit that was granted from a two-family to a single family.
Yeah, that's a different.
What we could do is we could ask town council if it's okay for us to approve this with the 5.5
So
foot.
I have the plan that they
Do we know
approved for
when
the two-family
the
with the same
grandfather
setback.
expired?
No, I do not know exact date, but it sounds like it's
5.6.
expired.
I
It's
have
been
the
quite a
original
while.
plan.
Yeah,
And
I think
and
that-
it's probably a
they're missing
2-year
that.
deal,
Two-year
and
deal.
it's probably past it. I wouldn't argue that point. I could, however, there's been a lot of extenuating circumstances over there, which, there's no question about that.
So if we approve this plan with a special permit, your battle's gonna be with Marshall. if he's gonna issue a permit or not. Sounds like he's
Well,
not
I
going.
think-
Sounds like he's not going to, by the letter. he
Right,
sent.
and what I think I'd like to ask the board to consider is to approve the plan with the 10-foot setback. And then if that complies with the zoning bylaw, if that's what he's looking for. That's the only part of the plan that's presented initially that shows the 5.6 feet setback that does not comply completely
Yep.
with the dimensional requirements in the central business district.
So then you just approving the all residential use.
No, the special permit, to amend the special permit from two-family to a single-family.
Right. All residential.
I would, you know,
And to do it pursuant to that second plan that shows the 10-foot setback.
based on the plan with whatever
You
dates on
have
it.
the full-size copies of that plan, Mike,
Of the-
with the
the-
10-foot setback.
Yes.
Could you, I mean, is there a reason why you couldn't go to the zoning board to get a setback variance?
Yeah, I find it very difficult to get any.
Yeah,
variance
you're not
from the
getting it.
zoning board these days. They won't give. And so we would prefer to just comply with the zoning and give it the 10-foot setback. I mean, what we were trying to come in here with is the same exact setbacks that we had, that were approved by the board, extended by the board back in March, and just go forward with a single as opposed to a two-family. But if the board, and I hear what the board's saying, because Marshall appears to be indicating that he's not going to be satisfied with the 5.6 setback, in which case, maybe the board would consider giving this man his relief tonight with the 10-foot setback, and we'll take our chances with Marshall.
I mean, I'd be very willing to make a motion to amend the permit, amend the special permit from a two-family to a single-family based on the plan, whatever that date is, with a 10-foot setback.
Have you seen it, Dave? You got any comments?
I haven't seen
It was never reviewed because this was just a special permit. Special permits don't get site plan review.
Therein lies the problem.
I'll second Jeff's motion.
Can you state it again?
To amend the special permit from two-family to a single-family, based on the plan of that date with the 10-foot setback.
Okay, he's asking for the single family. The two-family was already granted and an extension was granted.
So it's a single family.
But he wants the single-family.
He applied to amend
Well, that's what,
that permit. That's not what's before you right now. What's before you right now is to grant him an all-residential use in the central business district for a single-family home. He has an all-residential use for a two-family in the central business district. So you can only act on what's before you. And that is this single-family use in the all-residential district.
yeah, you just said it was a lot of words, but I said the same thing.
No, you're amending the two-family. The two-family's not in play.
It's still all, you were just saying the same thing. It was a two,
No.
we were for a two-family all residential, now we're going for a two-family with a single.
That's what he's
family.
applying
But-
for.
He already has a single family.
He's applying for the single-family use, guys. You guys haven't granted that yet, and you haven't denied that yet. You have approved
Oh, because it wasn't part of
the
that. original.
two-family many, many moons ago, and then you agreed to an extension of that in March, right?
March,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
So that is all over here, and tonight he's applying for the single-family, the special permit for the
Okay.
single-family for an all-residential use. So you can't amend the two-family because that's not before you tonight.
All right, so we just take that word out.
Yes, you're not amending anything, so you're either approving or denying the all-residential use in
It
the
would
central
be silly
business
to
district.
require a business as part of this
Correct.
development,
Right.
this project. It wouldn't make any sense.
Right,
So that's why we would approve it as an all residential.
right.
Yeah. So we'll make that motion, or is it still on the table? And he seconded it?
It could
We'll
be-
amend the motion that Jeff made to, or replace the motion that Jeff made to approve it as a single family with the 10-foot setback.
Approving all residential use
All residential use, single
in
family.
the central business
Yes, in the
district,
CBD,
or single-family,
single family, with 10-foot setback.
The 10-foot setback.
That's the motion on the floor.
So technically, we're not even approving the plan.
Right.
Now,
the all
approving the
residential
plan.
use.
And that's by Jeff, right?
That's by Jeff, seconded by me.
On the motion, any other discussion?
Just a question for my own curiosity. When you came before us last time, did you go in front of the building inspector before you came here? Or were you your first stop? Has the building inspector
the
seen any of
extension?
the previous ones? Yeah.
For the extension?
Yeah. When you went from a two-family to a one-family, did the building inspector see it then?
That's tonight.
No,
That's what we're doing
Yeah.
tonight. The only time that Mike or I have been before you, and I wasn't here, was just when he came for the extension in March.
Yeah, no, I'm asking if has the building inspector seen this plan in the past
Yes.
year?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he denied my,
It was the extension
denied
for
the
the
permit.
two-family, the original plan. There was no changes.
Yeah, he had a permit to build a two-family, and he wanted to build a single, and the building inspector said, no, you got a plan for
I guess my
two."
question is, should this have been identified before you came before us last time?
I'm not sure I understand completely.
Should the building inspector have identified this issue that your grandfather was expired before you came before us in
I
March?
wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think he needed to do it.
Okay.
The grandfather provision, what Marshall is speaking about, I don't personally agree with, because what we're here before you on is a special permit that was granted, which gave Mr. Bonomi the right to build a two-family house. So the grandfather part, I don't think is even a part of it, because he's got a permit, special permit, that gives him permission to build, you know?
No, I don't like the back and forth where we approve one thing and then all of a sudden, oh, wait, we found this whole issue, so now we have to come back and redo it all over again. I think it makes us look bad. So I want to see if this is something that should have been identified earlier,
Yeah.
so that next time it's a one-stop visit as opposed to coming back and forth. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of our time.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And I think even with that, Marshall could very well make him come back here for site plan. Because if he's got to hold this thing to the,
And just for the record,
the setback.
the Public Works said this proposal located at Assessors Map 53, Lot 160 appears to have no bearing on the sewer system, just for the record.
I don't have a problem with that.
All right. Do we need a vote?
Yep.
And the treasurer had no issues. Still. Yeah. So the motion?
Motion second.
Any, no further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Yeah. Would you like this plan?
It's clear as mud.
For records? Would you like that plan for your records?
Didn't, yeah, that's part of the problem. We didn't bring this one.
Thank you.
For this one?
No, they're here for this, Steve.
Do this one first,
Yep.
and not do this one?
No, keep that to the-
Okay, site plan review, 1145 Bedford Street. I guess is it 1145 or 1140?
Just like the facade of the building. It's going to look like it.
Good evening, my name is Sean Riley, 500 Washington Street, Abington, Mass., representing Mr. Stephen Goslin, who's appeared before you before, and Goslin Home Builders LLC. And with us tonight is Greg Tansey from Ross Engineering, who is the survey engineer of record. Steve is proposing a commercial structure in the highway commercial zone at the property 1145 Bedford Street. Just so we're acclimated, if you're going north on Route 18, you pass the fire station on your left, you pass Oak Street on your right, and this building would be right there on your right, almost directly across from Summit Road.
There's two houses in between.
There is, this would be, if you're due to the highway construction now, there's a retention pond on the right side of the road. This building would be next to that. So if you're going northbound, it would be, the building would be right before the retention area. That's owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that area now. Okay. I will let Dave do most of the talking. Dave Johnson is your review engineer, and Greg, because a lot of the questions and comments are more engineer and detail oriented. But just as Steve owns a couple of properties in Abington. I think you're familiar with the quality of his work and the landscaping and the maintenance of the properties. He actually owns a building somewhat diagonally across the street where the overhead door company is now. This building is very similar to that. And Steve will talk more about, the typical tenant he might have in here. The tenant hasn't been selected for this use yet, but it's intended to be someone who more of a kind of a contractor once again, not a restaurant. That's not designed and not big enough to be a restaurant or anything like that. But the site plans that have been submitted show that we satisfy the parking requirements, the drainage has been designed, the landscaping and photometric plans have been submitted. I know Norwood Engineering and Dave Johnson have done a pretty thorough review and submitted their review letter, which we're prepared to have a conversation and kind of go over some of the issues tonight. This property does not need any zoning relief. It's just the site plan review, the site plan approval that we'd be seeking here tonight. I've talked way too much tonight, so I'm going to try to just pass it on to perhaps Dave, if you want to just go right into the comments and reviews, or unless you want any sort of summary from us, or you
I
good?
think you summarized it
Good?
thoroughly. So I'll go over, I know you have a busy schedule, I'll try to hit on some of the more important points that should be discussed. This site does need some action from Mass DOT. So, the curb cut, the applicant is well aware of what they need to do. The two comments we have in regard to that was the width of the proposed driveway should be 24 feet instead of the 25, as I believe Mass Highway has a maximum width of 24 feet. The radii coming in the intersection with Route 18, which everybody knows is under construction, isn't shown. We just wanted something on the plan indicating if Mass Highway is going to be doing that intersection work, if the applicant is doing that intersection work, clearly indicate either by a note or with a design what that design is for the intersection of the driveway with the improved Route 18. The parking lot appears to be designed okay. There's one location we question the accessibility to the dumpster, but more importantly, there's an aisle between parking space 11 and 12, which is only about 16 feet in width. So if there's somebody parked in space 11, the ability to use 12 is generally unusable. If a trash truck came and both spaces were being used, it would be difficult to access that. So any condition of approval would have to have provision for off hours collection. One question we had that I think can be commented on by Mr. Goslin is the entire site, other than the paved parking area, is completely covered by crushed stone. No landscaping, except a small area in the back. And we just question why there's not more landscaped, open space area other than an entire crushed stone yard, sides and rear. And we just raised the issue, if this is going to be used for material storage or parking of additional vehicles, that could have an impact on the parking that's provided. If a different use is coming in that would attempt to use material storage or parking storage, it's going to affect potentially the number of parking spaces that would be required. So I'll break right there and give Mr. Gossel an opportunity just to respond as to why the entire site is surrounded with crushed stone.
My intent was just to have a little extra outdoor storage for potential user. I'm not quite sure what user, but it's been my experience though, they like to use it. Tenant needs a little extra space, they put it on the outside. Something that's allowed. Doesn't quite have to be as much stone. It's probably a little excessive. It could be a grass strip added. But, we have done that in some previous projects. It seems to work out well.
It is, the perimeter of the property around the crushed stone is actual grass and trees to be put in, which is shown on the landscaping sheet, which you can see there. And just if you can kind of visualize this property, as I think you're familiar, when you come up Route 18, you're kind of going up a slight hill. So the residents that we pass on the right are actually going to be lower than this property. They will see a fence along the southern side, right there, along with the
Is there anyone here that's interested in this?
Same thing in the rear. It is higher than the residence behind Oak Street's much lower grade than Route 18. So they would be essentially be seeing the trees. They're not going to see the gravel or anything. And Steve has used actually the gravel in the other building that we discussed earlier, around the back of the building on Route 18 on the other side of Route 18. Just cleaner maintenance, basically. But it still has, the tree lines, the landscape strip around the sides. As Vanna White is showing us right now. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on, and the board can take that into consideration. We make some general notes of a positive nature. The size of the project doesn't require any type of traffic study. As I said, they acknowledge the need of Mass DOT access permit, and they have provided on the plans site distance for intersection with Route 18. The stormwater comments, I'll skip over. Those are generally pretty mundane and something that we can discuss with the applicant's engineer. On the utilities, the biggest question we have is, there's an existing sewer line that services the existing residential dwelling that they're proposing to reuse. It's probably pretty old, but if they continue to want to use it, we're suggesting that they at least replace that portion of the existing sewer line that's under Route 18, which is being reconstructed, and put in a new line from the main onto the property if they want to tie into the existing sewer line. That's going to be the responsibility of the sewer department to determine what it is they want done with the existing main. So we're suggesting that from the main onto the property be replaced. We anticipate that it's old, and to go into the reconstruction of Route 18 only 5 years from now, 3 years from now, to have to replace that main, be counterproductive to what's being done with Route 18.
Can I just comment on that?
Sure.
That main is a new connection when they rebuilt the road, very new.
They put it, state put that in, okay,
Discovered that it's out, 6-inch PVC.
great.
So
That
the
addresses it.
connections off the road were
Brand new,
replaced.
so we built that road, I don't know, 15, 18 years ago.
The biggest grading issues that they haven't mentioned is that the entire right side, the rear, and a portion of the left side has a retaining wall that's built 1 foot off the property line in order to grade the site. The two issues that we raised in terms of that is, number one, you can see in the blue that Greg's colored up are the stormwater subsurface infiltration areas. So we have asked them to look at the retaining wall design. They've indicated the retaining wall design is going to be done by others. I assume that's going to be a structural engineer because of the height of the wall. The wall gets up as high as, I guess, 6.5 feet. So they'll need a structural design. We've asked them to evaluate, as part of that design, any impact that the amount of water that's going into those stormwater infiltration basins doesn't impact the wall because of the amount of water going in there. The other issue with the wall we just raised is that it's 1 foot off the property line, certainly can be constructed with proper sequencing, but what are we going to do with the 1 foot strip? Just going to let it revegetate, or maybe look at putting some crushed stone there, again, for minimizing maintenance, as Steve said, which you can take the stone from up top and put it over the wall.
Do that.
So that's the major issues with the grading. There is one other grading issue. The plan shows grading off the site onto the abutting property in the southwest corner of the site. In talking with Greg earlier in the week, he indicated that that grading is necessary to tie into the grading, the regrading of Route 18 as part of the improvement. It needs to be regraded by one of 3 entities. It either has to be done by the state, which I don't think they're going to do, or it's got to be done by the owner of that lot, or it can be done by the applicant with the permission of the owner. Any of those 3 is acceptable to us. We just want to note on the plan that essentially indicates that, and that the planning board, as part of their approval of this plan, is not granting any rights for the applicant to go onto abutting property in order to construct it.
And just if I could touch on that really briefly, just so the board's aware, that area is actually within a 16-foot right-of-way shown on an ancient plan. So there's no house in that area or anything. It's actually a right-of-way that was basically cutting from Bedford Street to Oak Street that was never developed. Thanks.
And I guess finally, street tree trimmings along Route 18 is required by 17550 is owned by law. There is landscaping proposed along Route 18. I'm just suggesting, to be consistent with that section of the bylaw, that some additional street trees be provided.
Can I add to that, Dave? We're required to have 2 street trees, and one of Dave's comments was, you're evaluating landscaping down here. Our thought was the street trees should be placed up in this area because of the incline of the hill. We should keep this sight line open for cars that are coming out or cars coming up the hill. We don't want to have a tree there blocking people as they're trying to look out the driveway. So the trees would likely be placed up in that area.
I'm not sure that planting of a tree in that area in the right location would affect sightlines, but you can evaluate that.
Depending on where you put it, what kind of tree you've got, right. But we'll plant the street trees.
So in general, the plans are complete. They comply with zoning requirements, except where we've noted. They're generally well-prepared, and the board can consider approving the plan. We've identified at least 3 conditions. The first one was to address the comments, a typical condition of approvals. Any change in the access drive that's required by Mass Highway would need to be looked at by us to determine if the changes are significant enough to have to come back to the planning board. And any change in use, because of the parking situation and the storage in the back, any change in use that affects the parking, we need to come back to the planning board for further review. So that's kind of going over pretty quickly the major items we have in doing the review.
We have one letter from the Public Works. This proposal located on Assessors Plan 59, Lot 159, must be approved by the Board of Sewer Commissioners at a regular scheduled meeting. And from the treasurer is no issue. Any comments from the board?
Have a few.
Before you start, could I, just so I don't forget, we would also request, as you've done before with Steve's projects, that we either waive or reduce the $25,000 performance bond given his history. Collins?
The frontage, the design of the front of the building, this isn't an Art Deco design, right? I'm seeing the grids and the squares, and it looks very much like an Art Deco, that's not what it is,
Very
right?
similar to the Merchants Row over in Hanover.
Which one?
Like front, Merchants Row, the old Bonside site.
Okay.
Very similar, high in the front, that facade look.
So this grid here are those bay doors?
Potentially 2 bay doors left and right. I mean, I could, it can go either way. Either I could go back with a different design, but yes, that plan is showing 2 bay doors.
Because I'm looking at the design behind you, and it looks like the building connects back there. Does the building connect in the back?
You mean,
Those are showing potential 2 offices in the middle there.
right, it depends on who, if the tenant wants to rent the entire place,
Right.
or half of it, or a third of it. So there could be a dividing wall between that area. Correct.
It's tough to project what we're gonna exactly do until we have the tenant.
Yeah.
Put it up on spec.
So there's just a difference between, is it, someone, like, I think your other building has, for instance, window tinting. They have window tinting? No, they have garage doors?
It's Mortland overhead door
Yeah,
and an auto repair, not repair, auto glass.
yeah,
So something similar, but this is showing a little more glass.
yeah. That was the question, is if you had a vision of it being, window tinting where they drive into the building and then you do the work there and...
My envision is 2 offices right in the middle, and left and right, two bays for potential whatever they want to use it for, whatever conforms to the zoning.
So is there a situation where it could be 4 tenants in the building?
Anything's possible,
Okay.
As long as we comply with parking.
right?
Yeah.
And use. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm less worried about parking, because you're not going to rent out something that doesn't have parking for it, so...
Right.
But you can see what I've done in the past, that, the tenant's got to fit the building.
Okay. So my 2 other concerns, echoing what Dave said, is the landscaping around the building. Right now, it's enough gravel, you could park 2 trucks side by side with the doors open, and it's excessive. I don't know how much outdoor storage they would need, if there's a way to cut it even by half.
Maybe I could add a little bit more. I just don't know, to be honest with you, as far as the type of tenant. I wouldn't want to restrict.
I mean, I'd be okay keeping it out back, but the sides, this is my personal opinion on 1 to 5. I think it's excessive. My other concern is the sides of the building will be metal sides. Okay. I don't know whether that's aligned with what we traditionally like in terms of design for our buildings. I think other buildings on Route 18 have used that. My concern is, one of the complaints I hear is that Route 18 starting about that area and heading north does not look great. And that's not your fault, that's not your issue. But all of those businesses lack any sort of curb appeal for the most part, except for the ale house, essentially. No curbing, no landscaping, it's just a lot of pavement, a lot of open road cuts, a lot of pavement going right up to the building, a lot of industrial style buildings. My preference would not to have metal sides. I don't know if anyone else on the board agrees with me. I'm not a fan of it, I don't like it, but I might be the minority there. What I'm trying to get at is just, this is awesome, we need more commercial in the town, all fit in favor of it. I just want to make sure it looks good and starts to bring up what we're seeing along that stretch of Route 18. So, those are my notes.
You know, I agree and disagree. I mean, I think the metal looks fine, and if you look at my 1080 Bedford Street building, gets right in, and you're in the north, and it's nice and clean.
The other great thing about Mr. Goslin's building is that his wife designs the landscaping. And I think you've seen that they're all have significant investments in landscaping, and these are Norway spruces that are being proposed, which, as you know, they're evergreens, they grow, so they'll break up that side of the building as you go up, and then the front, of course, would be very well landscaped, as his other buildings are. So I agree with you. Any upgrades as we're moving forward, the streetscape is important, and I think Steve has always been able to contribute to that.
I'm generally a big fan of what he's built, especially the residential buildings. I think they're a bonus for the town. I just want to make sure that we're lifting the standard that we expect for design, especially for commercial.
Any other questions?
I'm only in favor. I mean, I was impressed with the one across the street. I like the clean look of this thing. It's got that style that's kind of current without being, this is going to be ugly in a few years, that look, you know. So the siding and things, it really depends on how it's maintained, colors and everything else like that. You didn't have colors in here for that, but, you know, a piece of architecture can look fantastic, and then it could look like a piece of crap if it's not maintained. So, I guess my only concern would be is outdoor storage. I don't know what you're talking about with that.
I don't know exactly what I want to use it for, but.
Not for selling, not like selling landscape supplies.
I a nice tenant coming in as long as they conform to the zoning.
Yeah.
You only can handcuff them so much, you know, they need outdoor space, some uses.
Right.
Odds are you're not going to have a bunch of 40-foot trailers out back.
No, that's not on any of my properties.
Someone wants to make a motion?
One other question, the retaining wall that's on the south side, how high is that retaining wall? Is it?
I don't quite believe it's.
I think it's 6 feet, 6.5 feet on there.
As it goes back, I think.
Well, yeah, for a short period, in the rear corner, it's approximately 6 feet, but it's not six feet the whole length. It's just going around that corner, and then the grade comes up in the back as well. And along the back, it's going to be hidden by an existing fence that the neighbors have out back. And of course, it won't be as nearly high as you head towards Bedford Street.
My concern more is if it's impeding any water movement through the site, and I'm assuming that's something you would have looked at, and if it was a problem, you would have identified it.
Right.
They have a tremendous amount of drainage
Okay.
provided
Okay.
on the site.
You got that pond right
Someone like to make a motion
there. I'll make the motion
for the comments?
with the comments in Norwood Engineering's letter of September 9th,
Ninth.
2019.
Second that.
Any further discussion?
I'd like to amend it slightly. The board can say yes or no. I'd like a maximum of 12 feet of crushed stone or whatever is around the sides of the building.
I'll accept that amendment to my motion. Yep.
So Maximum of 12 feet.
Maximum 12 feet gravel in it. Oh, stone, excuse me.
I'll second.
The motion is amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that was all on the side of the building?
Side and rear.
Oh, and rear.
Just the side. Sorry, just the side.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you
No,
very
wait a
much.
second. Could we have a second motion to reduce the the bond from 25,000 to 5,000?
Make the, to reduce it to 5.
Yeah, Bob made the
Motion made, seconded.
second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Public hearing, definitive subdivision 392 Randolph Street, continued.
I don't know.
He's just,
Give him that, come back.
We ready? Okay, good evening. For the record, Eric Dias, registered professional engineer with Strong Point Engineering Solutions. With me tonight are the applicant, John and Eileen Kavanaugh, and their legal counsel, attorney Roger Dowd. We were before this board on this back in June for a formal public hearing on the subdivision, and I think probably 2 or so months before that on a sketch plan. So this board's certainly familiar. Just by way of reacquainting ourselves, there is an existing house on Randolph Street. The site comes out and fronts to Dorsey to a 40-foot width on this side. We're proposing what essentially equates to a paper street with a driveway and a small 2-lot subdivision. The last time that we were here in June, there was a bit of a communication breakdown, and we had just received comments from the review engineer sort of before the meeting. So what we said was we weren't ready to formally respond to those, but we looked through the letter. We didn't see anything that we didn't think we couldn't satisfy. So we presented to the board and then went out to satisfy those comments. I will spare all the gory details, but we have been working since that time with the peer review consultant. We did receive a letter back from them recently recommending approval to the board. They did have some notes that they want us to add to the plans, very minor things, notational type of items with regard to locate a granite bound in this location, things like that. Nothing that impact the design. We don't take any exceptions to them. Their recommendation to us was actually don't revise the plans before we go back to the board. Let's get to the board, get any final comments they may have, and then we'll revise these one last time, hopefully, so we can get Mylars to you, and hopefully we can be done with this should you choose to grant the subdivision approval. So just by way of briefly going over what the major changes are to this that came out of it, the big comment that the peer review engineer had prior was to provide a stormwater management system in the proposed roadway. We've done that, very traditional, 2 catch basins coming out to a manhole, tying in to an existing manhole here in Dorsey Street and going along its way with the rest of the municipal flow. We provided a stormwater management report that indicates basically that we don't have an impact at the outfall of that drainage system. So I think at least the peer review consultant is satisfied with that. The other thing that the board asked us to take a look at the last time we were here is we acknowledged that we have quite a few neighbors on this side. So they asked us to come up with some sort of a screening mechanism, a way to kind of separate the neighbors here from the construction on this side. So what we've done is we just proposed an evergreen screen. It actually comes out to be 27 trees planted on 10 foot on center along the property line. And that's going to provide a pretty good screen, better than a fence as things grow and things like that. Those are the finer points. I opened up to any questions.
Just like Eric said, I mean, we went through it, we provided them a review letter August 17th. Again, we suggested that they did not make any additional revisions until we get through the hearing process tonight. All the comments, again, as Eric said, really minor in nature, just some notations, adjustments to details. Mike asked for a couple pieces of additional information just to attach to the existing drainage report, which are very minor. We also provide them with a marked up set of the subdivision plan with notations on it, pointing out exactly what some of these additions and changes have been made. So at the end of the day, we've recommended that the board approve the plans, approve the project with your standard conditions, any additional conditions that the board feels is necessary, and also our review letter of August 17th. Upon which Eric can make the final changes, we can review the set of plans, make sure the final change has been corrected. They can give you guys final hours to sign.
Board members?
Two questions. So, regarding the waiver for the street trees,
Yes.
all 27 trees are along the property bound?
As currently shown,
Sorry, I probably shouldn't talk with a pen in my teeth in a public meeting. Right now, we have 27 trees shown here. I believe the review letter agrees that waiving the street trees along the sidelines of the roadway here is an appropriate request, but they do recommend that we install some street trees up in this area where the cul-de-sac kind of flares out a little bit. So we will add those to the plan.
Yeah, that was my question, request is.
We're not going to put any back here because this is our snow storage area beyond the T at the end, and certainly they die in the first winter. But on this side, we can probably fit, I would say reasonably, 2 street trees on either side at that point.
So looking at this, there's the circle.
Yes.
Out there. Is that just kind of an easement, or?
It's actually a right-of-way, so this is intended to be a private way in perpetuity.
Right.
That circle is what is dictated to be required by your zoning bylaw, even though the pavement isn't necessarily mimicking that circle. We have proposed just a hammerhead turnaround that we have discussed with your fire department, and they've indicated that they had no issues with that, or that they were satisfied with it.
My only other question is whether board members have any concerns with there not being any street lighting down there. It is, how far are the houses set back from Dorsey?
From the roadway, so the roadway is ending at roughly 200 feet, 185, and then the houses go back a little bit beyond that, at most another 100 feet. So the houses would be set back probably about 250 to 300 feet. I would suggest that this is really a common driveway. We're not ever proposing this for acceptance. We would have sign posted out front that this is a common driveway, don't turn down here unless you live here type of thing. Streetlights may be, in my opinion, not necessarily warranted in this case, but I defer to the board.
I think it might intrude on the other homes that are right next door too if you put one.
That's what I say, just, I mean, it's kind of wide open there back there now, but to add some, the houses are going to add some light as it is glowing in the backyard of everybody.
Okay. I think we passed a similar waiver for the housing development of Chestnut Street. And I think that was a mistake. That just, there's a lot of houses and want to make sure that people can see. But this is different, that all these houses are in someone else's backyard. So, that's all I got.
Does anyone from the public have any comments? Yes.
My name is Karen, I live at 42 Crosswood, we bought the property. And in past meetings, we had discussed and talked about the damage that had caused to our property with the debris that was put on from the landscaping company that they had run out of the property at that time. And we have such water damage that is coming onto our property from the grade difference from the debris that has been piled up. At that time, it was supposed to be removed. It was not removed, it was just pulled back a little bit from the property line. There's probably about a 2-foot difference between our original property and then the beginning of their property. It has caused significant damage to our trees. We have arborvitaes that were all along across here. There's probably about 4
There's
that
nothing
have
there.
perished.
Okay. Everything's been totally cleaned up.
We had a very large
Okay.
tree at one point that
All right,
came down
that's
during
actually
a storm.
the yard right there.
Okay. Their yard or John and Eileen's?
This is John and Eileen's, and that's the fence line where their
And
yard
we-
is.
our only
Okay.
concern
And this is
that we
actually,
want
this is
that
their fence
grass.
line too.
No, let me see that.
I mean, I think the trees, that proposal and that going in there will be wonderful. But I just want to make sure with the sale of the property and the division being put in, that our property is maintained.
If I may, through the chair, we certainly heard these comments when we were here the last time. We did reach out to the abutter. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make contact. I do have some photos here that I can submit into the record of the tree line, the fence line from the subject property here, looking at the fence line behind their property. I'm not seeing the piles of debris. Certainly, if there are piles of debris, we don't take any exception to a condition to remove them. And obviously, as you know, that there are very specific controls in place for what is supposed to happen during construction. So if, for some reason, whoever was to build the house on this lot, whether it be the Kavanaughs or someone else, did do work that impacted an abutter, there are certainly stop work orders and all kinds of means to rectify that situation.
I'd want you to go up and take a look at that, Patrick, all right? Okay.
And I can share the photos now if you'd like us to submit those into the record. Those photos are from the subject property in this location, looking toward the fence behind the O'Leary's yard, and I'm not finding the stockpiled areas.
We actually had to move our fence back by 10 feet because of the water runoff. And whatever it was.
Also.
Who you have your name set to?
My name's Edward O'Leary, 42 Crossing Street. When they were running the business behind the house, they were dumping everything up to the property line. They ruined our arborvitaes, they pushed it into theirs, thinking it was theirs. It wasn't. All I asked them was move it away. They haven't done so. The property level now, you guys are higher than me. And we were higher before. That's how the runoff is supposed to go.
Could you take a look at these pictures and see if...
This was never a kid.
What's that?
And the grade hasn't changed at all.
There it is.
The grade hasn't changed at all.
It most surely has.
The grade has never changed. I just put grass and topside in.
Could we have your name,
From the
please?
landscape
Excuse me,
company, they
excuse
go
me,
on about it.
excuse me, could you,
No landscape company running over.
excuse me.
John, you got to announce your
Needs
name
to all
for the
come through the
record.
chair, and could we have your name, sir, please?
John Kavanagh, I am the owner of the property. I've lived there for 13 years. I've been a resident, I live in Abington for the last 30 years. I own property here, I've always done the right thing. I haven't filled up that grade. I put topsoil to fill up some voids and planted grass. And I keep it maintained, I keep it cut, I keep it clean. There's no debris in this area.
There is no longer that, excuse me, there's no longer that at this point, but it was built up
He built it up. So
with
now
the debris.
Now it's of our property, which it should be the other way around on the table if you look at it. So the runoff is now staying in our area instead of going out. We built it up with the debris here from the landscape. We kept dumping truckloads and kept pushing it up to my property and onto my property.
Yeah, through the
Don't say
chair.
you didn't run a landscape.
Well, one thing that we could do through the chair, if I may, is we're certainly glad to take a look at this. One of the things that we looked at in accord with this evergreen screen, I believe the commission asked us to take a look at what we can do to divert stormwater runoff through there. The topography that we have, as it shows now, shows that this area through here is actually a high point. that we're not really proposing to do much with during construction. But what we could do, and certainly the board can condition this, and condition that we work with PMP on it, the solution to this would be just when we develop the lot to cut a small swale in here to direct stormwater runoff away from the property. Would not take much for us to do that. We don't take any exception to it, so we would cut in a small swale to divert water away on the backside of the evergreen screen that we proposed. We don't take issue with that.
Yeah, we'll have Patrick go up and take a look at it and make the recommendation. Yes, sir, in the back.
My name is Michael Marquardt, 374 Randolph Street, director of Project Kavanaugh's. 45 years I've lived at that property, but nothing but improvement. In that 45 years, there's been a lot of hazard trees out there. John took the initiative to take those down. The previous owners of the home were elderly folks. I used to help them out with those trees sometimes. I've helped John out with those trees sometimes. Nothing but improvements to that property back there. A lot of neighborhood kids were invited to play out there because it was away from the main road. They've been nothing but generous to that effect. And again, 45 years. You know, two sides of that board is my property, and I've never had any water issues or any type of issues whatsoever.
Anything else from the board?
I guess that was brought up the last meeting, too.
It was.
It didn't seem like there was a big solution to the...
Yes, unfortunately, and as I mentioned, please bear in mind to the board, you know, it's been roughly 90 days since we've been here. We did reach out and try to make contact with the O'Learys a few times. We were not able to make contact for whatever reason.
That's not true.
Well,
I spoke with you prior to, I actually spoke to you on the phone at one point, prior to the meetings, and then you weren't able to get in touch with. You were unavailable at one point. I had tried to get in touch with you, and I was told you were not available.
Well, this is news to me. I can document the phone calls that we've made to the O'Learys. So, you know, what I would ask, if the board is at all comfortable with it, is to allow us to work, if so inclined to approve tonight, condition it that we work with PMP to get this taken care of so that the Kavanaughs can move forward.
And if you could leave your telephone number with PMP, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And I'll go out there, I can probably get out there tomorrow, Wayne.
Okay.
And take a look at this and get a report right out to the board. But again, I mean, again, you can also include that with your conditions of approval.
Right.
Any additional recommendations I make in that report.
Mary, excuse me.
Are there any other abutters here who haven't spoken? Just the two that have? All right. Your neighbors all know about this and? Okay.
Mary Ryan has been out to our property several times and has been involved in this also.
All right. I want to make sure that we're not going to, 3 months from now, get questions, oh, I never heard about this thing, but the notice has been put out, the neighbors know about it.
I don't know if the neighbors knew about this meeting.
The first meeting that we had in June was certainly advertised, and there were several abutters that came out to speak.
Yep.
I believe that the O'Learys were the only ones who spoke in opposition, or at least I should say concern, if not opposition. So.
We're not in opposition, we're just concerned for the property.
Absolutely. Understood. And through the chair, you know, like I said, the solution to that, if there's an issue, is to redirect the water. We have no issue doing that.
Any additional subsequent
We could have a motion to approve this with the letter of August 17th from PMP, and with PMP looking into the drainage situation at the same time.
I would ask the board, have a condition for a time limit on how long they have to get the subdivision completed. I know that's something the board's looking at as a rules and regulations thing, but if we could start having that now, that would be helpful. So we don't run into problems.
Do you have any idea how, what's going to be done, how soon you're going to complete this, or how long it's going to take? Obviously, you've got to sell the house lots and then... decide.
Right, absolutely. Do we have any idea as far as how long we expect before we break ground to the time that we're done? So we don't know for certain what that would be. I would think an appropriate term for something like this might be an approval for, say, typically 3 to 4 years with the opportunity for a reasonable extension if warranted, is what I've seen done in the past, but again, I defer to what the board is comfortable with.
I think that's a little further than you were thinking.
2 years, perhaps?
I guess the only problem I have is that the roadway's complete. For the You need the roadway complete for the houses.
Right. And the roadway would, if I'm not mistaken, there would be a covenant, the houses would still require lot release, is that correct?
Yep.
So the roadways would have to be complete to at least the standard of having binder down. And that would, certainly we'd be back before you for lot release, or we wouldn't get building permits.
I think our problems with how long it's taking is in a bigger subdivision versus a 2-lot.
Yeah, this gets built pretty quickly when they go,
I mean,
yeah.
Our other problems are with the bigger subdivisions that aren't finished, the roadway's not finished.
You know, I would anticipate that at this point, in this year, with as busy as everybody is, I would imagine that construction on that roadway doesn't start this year because we're fighting the asphalt plant's closing. So I would think it's a spring build at the soonest. And, you know, once it does go, this road gets built very quickly. So I think, you know, 2 years to allow for market conditions and things like that, I think might be appropriate.
Wayne, if I may? Yes. I think a lot of your concerns too with some of these bigger subdivisions that were approved actually quite a while ago, suffered through the market. You know, we see some of these new ones like Veterans Place where, you know, Mr. Egan's not wasting any time in getting that whole thing blown out.
There's one in particular that's pretty much finished and the road's not complete.
I think
The one in particular that we're talking about.
All right, yeah, somebody had a question? Yes, sir, Mr. Marquardt.
Do you have a standard that you normally issue that 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years?
No.
1 year?
Do we presently?
Yes.
Yeah, no, we don't.
And that's part of the problem.
So that's what we're asking for, because some people just have mud and all sorts of problems. I mean, actually, if someone put up a bond, they wouldn't have to put the roadway in if the bond was existing, parts of it, or complete it. And as long as the bond is here, we have the security, but the problem with it is not so much the last few years, because we haven't had the inflation that we've had in the past, and obviously fuel's come down, so asphalt hasn't risen like it normally does. That's another problem that we run into when something doesn't get done in a period of time.
I can't imagine that a 2-lot subdivision, they're not gonna finish the road.
No.
Yeah. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that, it's kind of a glorified driveway.
Well, I didn't wanna say that.
In a way, it is. You know, it's a very nice driveway. And the other thing, too, whoever builds this, they're going to come in here and blow these 2 houses out, and bond or not, they're not going to get a CO on these houses without having at least binder down for the roadway.
That's the point I was going to raise. Before you do a lot release, you are going to still require a bond on the project.
Yeah.
So, someone like to make a motion?
Well, I'll make the motion, provided the issues in the back with the drainage get resolved.
Yeah, second that motion.
Motion made and second, and with the PMP letter of August 17th.
Yes.
And a subsequent letter from
Please.
and a subsequent letter from Patrick.
Yes.
And do you want anything on the deed saying it's a common drive?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Patrick, your letter does mention the issue with the street trees.
The letter we did on August 17th does.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a note that we were requiring them to show the location of the shade trees.
Okay.
And tree planting easement around the cul-de-sac. And then the follow-up letter I'm going to do is going to address, you know, this potential drainage issue on the property. And we'll take a look at that and see what I can say.
This doesn't have to be part of the motion, but I'd like a letter of update at our next meeting, just to make sure this is all.
They have to come in with the MyLars anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
And I will offer as well, if Patrick, you want to meet on site, I'm glad to meet out there, and we can coordinate that with the O'Leary so they can show us exactly what their concerns are. Whatever's appropriate, we'll get this taken care of.
the motion?
Bob, you made it? Who seconded it?
No, Jeff.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
You want to vote for this?
And the waiver, Joe.
We did submit an updated waiver request. I would probably go with this because I'm not sure, 100% certain that the plan you have includes those. I'm not sure which one you have. Is that it? Good, okay.
It's the side elevation.
Yep, that's right. I'm sorry? It's actually, the waiver request is a separate letter. Yep.
Okay.
All of these we've discussed, the lighting.
We have. If you want, I can summarize what they are, if that makes
Sure.
things a little bit easier.
Yep.
So the first waiver that we are seeking is relief from the requirement of a curb radius of 20 feet right in this location. If we had to have 20 feet in this location, it would actually encroach on the neighboring property, which certainly we don't want to do, given the level of service of the roadway and its function essentially as a driveway. We don't feel that 20 feet is necessary. The second one is the requirement for a turnaround with a landscape center island. We've gone with the hammerhead design to obviously conserve pavement, conserve disturbance, and it has been reviewed by your fire department, and they've indicated that they don't take exception to it. The next one is a requirement for a 25-foot minimum easement at the end of the cul-de-sac to provide continuation of pedestrian traffic or utilities to the next street. There's no way to ever extend this. So we've sought a waiver from that. Requirement for a sidewalk on a local street. Basically, Dorsey Street doesn't have sidewalks now. This would basically kind of be a sidewalk to nowhere, and with the level of service that we're talking for this, we don't feel that it's necessary. Requirement for vertical granite curbing along both sides of the roadway. We have vertical granite curbing is proposed along the eastern and western sides of the road, and we're proposing no vertical granite curbing at the end of the hammerhead to allow for snow storage. We don't want the curb in the way to kill it. The requirement of street trees we talked about. We've requested that we waive the need for the easement at the abutting properties because it would simply be on their property, but we will include it along the cul-de-sac, the circle. And the last one is the waiver from the requirement to provide street lighting, again, on the basis that this is very, very low service and no pedestrians and things of that nature.
On the waivers?
Make that motion.
Motion's made, seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. So moved.
Great. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate it.
999 Adams Street, as built. Can I take your sweat off, please?
I was gonna ask Dave, there's music cold in here.
I bought a fleece.
It's
gonna be cold when you get out of here.
That's okay. Okay. I've had enough heat this summer. I'm good.
Got yourself a cramp a little while ago. did, and all of a sudden, it was like,
those. How you been, Jeff?
Was he involved last time?
No, we had to get him because John Clarkson passed away, so I had to get a new engineer.
John Clapp passed away? Oh, my God.
He got throat cancer. 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And he
Yes,
and he
you're
was
on.
an occasional cigar smoker. That was it. Yeah, it was bizarre. We didn't even know.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Azra Chenero. I'm an engineer with TET Engineering, and we've been retained by Precast Specialties to help them address the comments that were raised. Obviously, I did a letter dated August 13th. That was my birthday. I specifically did that on that purpose. But I don't find any problems with the review comments by the board's engineer. I think some of the work that was done could have easily come here for consideration for a modification. But that being the way it is, I'm not sure, other than planting a couple of trees and then putting a curbing along the back area and possibly paving that so that you don't have washouts. And I think they also need to go back to conservation to let them know that they need to pull back some of the work that wasn't actually pushed into the wetlands. And the drainage basin is actually functioning very well. I've been out there at least 4 times following a good rain event, and it drains within 12 hours. It doesn't, the code, the DEP regulations say you have to drain within 72 hours, but it's actually drains in 12 hours. So it's really functioning very well. But it still does need to have the emergency spillway that was not installed in the event of a 100-year storm event. So, and they're planting a couple of trees along Adams Street. And for example, the curbing that they used, they were supposed to put a berm. The concrete curbing, which is becoming very famous, popular, if you will.
Not on this board.
Not on this board. Well, I would say for a subdivision, no.
Okay. No.
For a subdivision, definitely not.
We like
But-
granite.
Right, but for a site plan development and the type of work that they do, it would seem, it makes more sense for them to use concrete curbing and applying their product to their project.
If it looks bad, that's up to them.
Yeah,
We just don't,
yeah.
we want granite.
So, but that was approved by Tuminous Burn for the site plan. So I'm hoping that the board would allow the, I have a plan that we submitted. Basically, they planted some of those trees. They're missing too. And this is the basin. And so what I'm saying that is to pull this curbing, this gravel, because right now it's gravel. Perhaps pull that back and pave it so you don't have the material going into the wetlands when they plow it. You know? And then I asked the board to allow those changes to be made and then wrap up the site so that, you know, right now it's not paved, and I'm thinking it should be paved. The drainage system will still work around the numbers if you paved it.
So that's what you're recommending to them, to correct in the back?
Yes, sir.
Right. We have gone forward a little bit. I'm John Cardiff, and I now work for Precast Specialties. And we have gone forward and we have added this additional street trees so that there's an adequate amount of trees as per the plan. That's the one thing that has been done, and we've discussed the fact that we're going to be putting in a 24-inch concrete curb and paving the back and paving the back of the building.
Board members?
I'm glad it's being resolved. My question for the chairman is, do we have any info on recourse in general for addressing the violations that happened? What are we able to?
Well, theoretically, they have to go and make them according to plans. That's the original thing. However, if they can prove that it's working, I know what you're saying, because it happens all the time that people, I mean, actually the building is a foot wider than it's supposed to be, and what do you do after it's done? Tear the building down or remove 4 feet of it or whatever it is. And those are things that we could probably do. Bob could probably give you a better answer on that from the building standpoint.
I'd be interested to know what the range of penalties that we could levy.
That's something maybe we bring up with Dan when he does our review.
Yeah. Because this is, no offense to anyone
No,
at this table.
I understand 100%.
This was so severe that I think we need to talk about, okay, they've resolved this, and what else? So.
As an example that I've seen, there was a, thinking it was down in Hanover, Norwell, the man who actually did Merchants Row across the street built a strip mall, and he got approval for it with the parking in the back. When he built it, the parking was in the front and the building was in the back, and he added a bank on the side. Well, they kind of gave him the parking thing, but they made him tear down the bank section over there. That whole thing came down.
Yeah, I mean, and we do have a bond, which probably wouldn't be adequate to cover it. I think probably a $25,000 bond we have. That's, we had problems like this, and we used to have a small bond, and then we just made it, because we'd have a bond for $5,000 or $10,000, and the person that built the thing said, hey, it's going to cost us more money to do it than we want to spend on it, so you can have the money. And that was the problem, and that's why we had the minimum bond of $25,000, and that's why, as it happened tonight, a developer that came in that always does his work, and it's obvious we don't need a $25,000 bond, but theoretically, we would if they built the building in the wrong place. I mean, 25 wouldn't go anywhere, but...
And I think, from a legal standpoint, it's just an incentive to get them to, can't actually take the money and go on their property and finish it.
No, you can't.
So I think it's more of an incentive for them to get their money back to complete the project.
Yeah.
According to the plan, I guess.
That's initially why
Yeah.
it was done, because
Yeah.
it was a $3,000 bond back in the day.
Right.
And like you said, everybody was like, I'm done as much as I can eat the $3,000, and I got no problem with that. And you decided to make it a $25,000 bond so that it is an incentive for the developer to complete the project.
Right.
I know. I've been talking to Paul about what happened during the course of this whole construction thing, and he is he's beyond sorry. I mean, he truly is. He didn't, they didn't realize, they're all the, not that I'm downplaying the Canadian thing, but he didn't realize the importance of sticking to the plan. He thought, the site plan itself was, in general, what they were supposed to do. He didn't. So, and he came in. Paul came in after the fact anyway. There were a couple of other gentlemen that are now not with the company that were overseeing everything. And that's what happened. I mean, there was a lack of communication between a lot of entities.
Who was our reviewing engineer?
Fields and Thomas.
Have they got what you've done?
You met with them, right?
I haven't seen anything from this.
He was out at the site.
We discussed Adams Street.
Yeah.
Not Adams. The other project on 18, the Learning Center. That's what I met with Dave.
No, did you meet with Matt Cody from Beals and Thomas?
No, I never reached out. Nobody ever came calling me back.
He said he was that you wanted to meet with him and he would do that, so.
I guess I haven't seen anything from him.
No,
I guess
the last letter we have is November 16th, 2018.
Right, the one that we
Yeah, the
responded.
original
That's the
letter.
4-page letter.
And I basically agree with those comments, and just said that, obviously they should have, it's one of those shoulda, coulda, woulda.
That's correct. I guess my biggest problem with that is for the two of you to talk about the drainage, and I have our engineers
Yeah,
okay
sure.
that everything is functioning properly, that you've proved it to them, and
Okay.
that's my biggest concern. That's why I asked if we had seen anything from him. Had he looked at this new plan?
Well, I was
compared to-
hoping that he'd looked at it,
Apparently he hasn't.
Is he in different office from Dave?
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, they're
they
in
don't work
Plymouth.
at the same place. Dave works for Norwood Engineering, and he works for Beals and Thomas.
Dave used to work for Beals and Thomas.
I'm friends with him for 50 years. I know all the places. He used to work at Old Colony. too.
Right.
So I guess I just feel a little better about it if our engineer looked at what you've done.
Okay.
Do you need his information?
Yes, please. Okay, cool. All right.
You can have this. That works, right?
Okay, great, thank you.
Not that I don't trust you, Azu.
No.
It's a process. It's a process.
Better to have it in writing, right?
President Reagan pulled over Mikhail Gorbachev.
Oh, I get.
He says, I trust you, but I just want to verify
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
All right, fine.
Okay, great, thank you
Thank you
very
so much
much.
for your time, appreciate it. Have a good night.
It's been a long night.
It's gonna
Lot
get
of
longer.
stuff.
It's gonna get longer.
Like this here?
Huh? What's Mike? That's great.
Normally it was exchanged.
I do.
Got that money?
Not that money. Have a good night.
Night. Any comments on the zoning board of appeals?
A little late. Considering they've already gone home.
No, I know it, but it's too late anyway, but I didn't really have any comments or anything.
I didn't see it.
That's all we have, other than the 645, right?
What's this? The way the back,
Waive sign.
container way.
Oh, okay,
That thing,
all
we
right.
do that out there.
Yeah, Bruce, I was going to disappear, but I'm going to have to stay, and I'll turn the meeting over to you for the next hearing.
Hey, Liz,
I'll come back to the end.
quick question on the zoning board. I don't know if you know the answer.
Yeah.
The fire rebuild on 1097 Washington? It's the one next to the Frolia, or two over from the Frolia.
Yes, they have, there's a fire in the house, and I don't know what they're asking for, but
I was just curious if they were doing a complete rebuild or just a little bit, or that they had to go to the zoning board, because that was the bathroom upstairs damage.
Okay, well, hang on. 6:45, public hearing, site plan review, and special permit application for 0 Center Street 2. I passed out to the board members the zoning regulations for the Todd District, if anyone would like to see them, and for your information. And I just want to know, do you intend, all these plans that have been presented so far have no business element? And I'm told that at your public hearing the other night, you were told that there's not going to be any commercial element to this because no one wants it. Well, I'm reading the transit-oriented bylaw. Under section C1, mixed-use developments in accordance with the uses identified in 175-21, Table of Use Regulations. Residential uses are allowed within the district only as part of the larger mixed-use development and is not as a standalone principal use except by special permit by the planning board. Residential components may not exceed 50% of the gross floor area of a proposed development except when residential use is located in upper floors. Residential uses may be located on the upper floors of commercial buildings. Okay, before you start your presentation, do you have any intention to conform with the zoning bylaws for this district?
So, no, we're seeking that waiver
Okay.
from the commercial component.
Well, this is a non-starter as far as we're concerned. You haven't presented, you're seeking a waiver. This district was intended to be a mixed-use district, and it's a prime area in Abington. And you're proposing to circumvent the zoning bylaws as written. We created the transit-oriented development district for a purpose, to have business uses in there. It was not intended to encourage residential development solely. I think before you waste any more of our time, I think you need to revise your plan to include a business. You need to come back to us with a plan that meets the zoning requirements of this district. Or if you want to seek a waiver, and I'm not inclined to give you a waiver because this district was never intended to be a residential district only. So you spent a lot of money on this so far, but this isn't what the intent of this district was. So, I mean, again, you've got people that have come out here to hear this, and your client has spent a lot of money on this, but it doesn't meet the intent. And I think you need to go back. You either need to tell us up front that you want to seek a waiver for this, or you need to present a plan that meets the spirit of the zoning regulations.
So when we first came here, we came in with that intent.
But did you state it?
We did. We showed it on the plan. We showed a plan with retail on the first floor, and we had 3 floors above that, and we are clearly meeting that, we can meet that.
But do you have a plan? Do you have businesses lined up? Do you have clients?
We've, yeah.
Can you show us this?
We've done a market study on that, and
I don't care about the market study. Can you show us that you actually have clients lined up to go in these places?
Can I interrupt for a second? We have approved 2 housing developments in this district that has 0 commercial.
But one of them was a 40B.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
The 3 townhouses. We just did 3 townhouses by the entrance. We did another 3 down the street.
But there's a 40B development in there, Rick.
It's not 40B. They weren't 40B.
Yes, it is.
On Center Street, on 123, we have 2 separate townhouse
But the one on
developments.
Summer Street is a 40B.
I'm talking about on 123.
Which is in the Todd District.
On 123, they're in the Todd District. None of them have commercial. They're all 100% residential.
Actually, you just approved one across the street from our development, not the 40B one, that the commercial was waived, directly across the street, that's being built now.
Yeah, when we first came in here, and this is a good discussion. When we first came in here, that was our intent. We had a daycare that we have talked to a couple of daycare centers. We hired, is it Bond Associates that came in and did told us what retail stores would be interested. There might be a state agency and so forth and so on. So we've gone down that road. And when we came in, what we found was that both at the first meeting that we had here in this group, and then we had a separate meeting downstairs in August, and there's just, because of the traffic, because of what was coming in there, we thought, we can eliminate the traffic and it would help, we thought it would help the, but if it's the board's, doesn't really matter to us. Other than the fact that we think that, it's a better project without it there. And that was it. But we got a lot of resistance from the neighbors saying that, there's just a tremendous amount of traffic because of that. And we were going to increase that traffic.
But the neighbors aren't going to approve it. We are.
Totally understood, and that's why we're coming here to you to talk to you and say, hey, look, what's your pleasure, and what we will be asking for some waivers here, and it's your, it's this board's decision to say whether it goes or it doesn't. And I'm humble in that idea, and I'm perfectly willing to put the commercial space in there. We just don't think it really fits, and it doesn't make a lot of sense in that area.
Well, it's a strong recommendation of our planning consultant, Dan Crane, that this does have an element in it. I mean, I'm just reading from the bylaw, and these folks have it, and you have it in front of you, and you must have known this before you proposed this thing.
Our original plan had had a significant retail component in.
It meets the bylaw.
In the larger building.
Yeah.
That ran along Monahan's Way, that went, we had our original plan actually had two buildings sitting in kind of a Tetris, and we had retail on the back building and retail on the front building, and then it was residential across the street. But it would have had a significant amount of retail, probably about 30,000 or so square feet of residential, of commercial. One of the big conversations during our meeting with the residents was that we would be putting units there instead of, we would be eliminating a floor off the top, and
Bringing the height down.
Bringing the height down to alleviate some of the height concerns, and then putting units in there, but maybe, having a small amount of commercial that's respectful of the commuting. I don't necessarily disagree with you that transit-oriented development overlay districts should be, should not be 100% residential. I mean, that's, as a kind of a planner by heart, that's what the intent is. But you have to weigh that against, the abutting opposition, and I don't know how to reconcile all the concerns while also meeting the overlay district bylaw. I think that's where we're struggling right now. And that was the intent. We thought that this was a nice design, and again, I mean, this is more informal because you don't have this plan in front of you because this has been developed. We'll be submitting this plan. Well, you can have it tonight.
Yeah.
But I mean, changing the first floor from residential to commercial is not a huge deal at all, except for parking and impervious surface. I mean, from a financial standpoint, it certainly hits to the the financial feasibility of the project. But again, we're developers. We're looking to get a project approved that makes financial sense, but also makes sense to the planning and the zoning. One of the things that we told the residents when we met with them was, look, we bought this property because it was in an overlay district and because this is what this was designed for, but for the commercial. And we meet every component of that, and the one waiver really that the bylaw specifically states is that you can get a waiver from commercial, which you've granted in the past. So that was, my thinking is just having seen those waivers before, was that, look, the notion is, and most of the, we had Mansard Commercial come out and say, yeah, you'll have some people that might be interested in this space, but the likelihood is going to be like what you're seeing at Union Point, which is a lot of forced retail spaces that are not going to be filled. And ultimately, a lot of the conversation that comes up about that, and this is completely generalization, but I've been in a lot of these meetings, is what are you going to do with that open space? Are you going to put, residential? Eventually, you're going to just come back and put residential in there. I mean, I don't know any developers that are really doing that in urban settings, but in rural, I mean, I guess it could happen. And the reality is what happens with that space is that you carve out 20, 30, 40,000 square feet of commercial space. It may get rented, and some of it gets rented, and then the other stuff just becomes amenity space and becomes open space.
I would feel better. I mean, I'm a professional planner. I worked for the Old Colony Planning Council. I've been a planner for many, many years. I would prefer a plan that meets the spirit of the law. And it's good that you had the community meeting. I couldn't go to it because I had another meeting that night. But again, we're the board that makes this decision, and we're supposed to go by this. And this Todd district was created for a reason. And I really believe in Todd districts. I would like to see, I mean, if you were going to, from the get-go, and you were going to just do this as a residential project, you should have told us this, and it would save us a lot of time.
We weren't, and that changed after we came in and we listened and we heard what people wanted and what they were saying, and that's why we came back, and that's why we're coming back now. But we listened hard the first meeting, and we listened hard the second meeting, and it's, we just don't think that, that retail is going to increase the we think that retail is going to increase the traffic tremendously in that area. And we, the reason we put a convenience store in there or some type of store in there is to keep the residents from having to get in their car and drive out somewhere else. And that's what we listened to, and that's what we heard, and that's what the architect came back and said, and the engineer and the lawyer that we have is, everybody said, it's like, we just don't think that the retail, they want the retail. And
I'm thinking of a village setting, like Pine Hills in Plymouth, which, is mostly residential, but they do have, and that's not to be a Todd district because, but I mean, they have shops and stuff like that in there. I mean, you're creating, people are gonna wanna live in this thing if it goes because it's near the train station. I mean, I work in Brockton and, Rob May and City Planet, they do a lot of Todd because they've got 3 train stations in Brockton. And I think that was always our intention, was to have a small community with the residential. It would have some services, a convenience store, a barbershop, things like that. To just have it all residential. I don't see how a small convenience store that could serve the units in this are going to jack up the traffic significantly.
No, I don't either.
So-
I think that small convenience store in some amenities, I don't think is a bad idea. Yeah.
This on the first floor is the original area where we had anticipated some retail space. So right now, we have a community room there. That's easily even if we did half of that for a convenience store. I mean, even when we were having the conversation around this with the residents, the idea is that, yeah, we would likely try to entice some sort of commercial in here because it makes sense to have a coffee shop or a dry cleaner or
It's not like
something.
you're going to have a Stop and Shop in there.
No, these would be small, pop-up shops, or, I mean, you're looking at a real limited number of, pizza, coffee, dry cleaners. Our original plan that we submitted back in June that had a daycare center. In fact, we asked that the traffic study include a daycare center so we could stretch the amount of cars that were coming into the development to its limit, because daycare provides the largest number. And so that's what we did, but that whole first floor was going to be all that was going to be all commercial. I mean, if we were to do all commercial back on that first floor, then we would be going back up. We'd have to go back up to the 4th floor, and then we have to deal with the height.
Yeah, I've just to answer what my fellow planning member would call it. These other projects that we approved as residential only in the Todd district were small. This is a very big project. And again, I think in order to meet the spirit of the bylaw, we're going to have to get a continuance on this anyway. And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to be on vacation in October. So when we continue this, I'd like to continue this to the November 4th meeting. Because we're going to need a full board to vote on this thing. And if I'm not here, and I've got to chair this because Wayne can't, so you need a full board.
No,
Sorry, my wife and I need to go on vacation. So don't break into our house if you're watching this on TV.
I think the chief had some comments.
Yeah.
The chief did.
Can we just, can I give a brief overview of the design changes just before the chief speaks? Because we actually had some great conversations with the chief, and I think we met some of what we've talked about. But the original plan had 3 buildings over here in this little enclave. We stretched them out, lowered the floors, brought down the number of units from 175 to 160. The TOD bylaw calls for 1 parking space per. We're maintaining 175 parking spaces across the 3 parcels. We put in some privacy fencing along the Progress Street to address a lot of those concerns with those neighbors, and also added in some
a 20-foot buffer.
20-foot buffer there. So we've handled
22.
We've handled quite a bit of the concerns. I mean, we're trying to juggle a lot of the concerns, so I just want to, and this was intended to be a continuation hearing as anyway, because we're trying to juggle a lot of those concerns. I mean, we want the best project to come out of this that we can possibly do. And one of the big conversations when we met downstairs was, you know, we know that there's a number of residents in this neighborhood that want 0 units here, but that's not what was designed there. That's not what the overlay says. And we want 175. So let's figure it out, you know, and let's talk about what's gonna work best here. And I think this is a good plan. If we're to add commercial to it, I think we can do that. We just need to know.
Yeah,
You know?
and I think the spirit of hearing what you're saying is that let's try to get to the spirit of what we're talking about. Let's get some commercial in there. I'm not against that at all. I'm
Let's
not,
go for
yeah.
what was originally intended when we passed this bylaw. You know, okay, I'm gonna bring up
Yeah.
Chief Nuttall.
Yeah.
Just, okay, we did have a good meeting, can I approach?
Just identify yourself, please, Chief.
John Arnold, the Abington Fire Chief. Thank you. And I was at that meeting a couple of weeks ago downstairs with a lot of the residents. It was more of an informal meeting. And, you know, I proposed a couple of ideas of perhaps eliminating one of the physical structures. I'm not an architect, but I think we kind of redid that somewhat, and they had done that, so I thank you. But Bruce, this is more for your original question prior to this. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you. Your original question was, did they really plan on having commercial as part of this project?
I don't think I did myself.
This is from the packet the fire department received. This is dated April 10th of 2019, and if you read through the entire thing, and Bruce, this is highlighted right here, this one paragraph, I believe, prior to any meetings with residents, with their concerns, right there is saying that they weren't.
It says you're gonna exclude, from the get-go, you were excluding the commercial component.
We said that in a public hearing. When I was here, I specifically said, we would be seeking a waiver of the commercial if if the board was willing to entertain that, because we don't think that it's gonna lease up. I've been very honest about that from day one, that we just didn't think that the market will bear the amount of commercial that is required in this area. So yes, we have, but if the board came back and said, no, we're not gonna grant that waiver, then we keep the retail space as is. And then you have a situation like you have in a lot of these downtown districts where the retail just doesn't lease up over time. When we pro forma this, just to get into the financial aspects, we actually include 0 revenue for the commercial, because, you know, banks they just won't look at it.
Well, I'm sure banks have financed, I'm sure banks have financed projects in Todd's. And I'll bet that if I went to other communities that have Todd's, and you got Brockton, you've got Stoughton, you've got Quincy, you've got places, I'm sure that commercial is part of the Todd. So, I'm sorry, but I think banks will finance that, otherwise people wouldn't be doing these deals. How are they getting the money to do these things?
Well, you make it up in the rental.
Yeah. I just,
No, we'll come back. We're not against that, you know, and we're not trying to, you know, walk away from it or in any sense of the way. If that's the desire, we thought it was a better project, you know, and you guys are saying, you know, you're saying no, and, you know, you'd like to see some back in there.
I want to see some commercial uses in there that would support that as a 170-something unit community.
Okay.
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
they're building almost 100 units 3 houses away from me on Randolph Street, but, you know, they can be supported. There's a True Cheese, there's a Dunkin' Donuts and stuff like that. Where your project is, there's nothing out there. So, you know, if there were some services, to me, I'm on the advisory board of Union Point. I think it's a travesty that there is no retail in there. I have a friend who works in sewer placement for Cumberland Farms. She says she's approached them, and they turned them down. How insane is that? That you can't even get a cup of coffee in that place? You know, I mean, turn down a Cumbies, but, you know.
Well, there's reasons for that, too.
Yeah, I
Because
know.
If it goes so long without renting them up at the pro forma rents, then they can convert that back to residential as part of it.
Well, I've been involved with the Union Point thing, to save the base, all the boards, and I represent the Old Colony Planning Council on the advisory board, so no, and all the stories of that place. But, I mean, this is getting back to the original intent. We passed this district zoning for a reason. It was a proposal at one time to have a waste transfer station there, truly. Morrison and Knudsen, big engineering firms, which is now, well, anyway, or they were gonna do that. And this residential is better than having a waste disposal thing. But I think that we, as the planning board, would not be doing our jobs unless we asked you folks to stick to the spirit of the bylaw as it's written. I'm just one voice on this planning board. I won't vote for a waiver. I don't want to see this 100% residential project. I want to see at least the spirit of the zoning bylaws addressed and have a commercial element in this.
It would be nice to have businesses that complement the whole project as a whole. I think it can be done.
That's what we're asking for.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
I don't want to
yeah.
stop and
Yeah.
shop in there,
Yeah.
and I don't want a biolab in there, but I want businesses that people could go get a cup of coffee, buy
Dry
some
cleaners, right?
few
Yeah.
things, needed things, maybe have a service in there, beauty salon, something, anything. Maybe a small, even a small place to eat.
Yeah.
Make it a neighborhood.
No, it's,
I mean, I just want to be clear, like, we can carve out retail space that meets those demands. I don't think we'll be able to pre-lease them before we get an entitlement.
But I mean, at least show us that you have an intent to do it. I mean, ideally, I'd love for you to come back to our November meeting with Lisa signed up. You're gonna tell me, hey, Bruce, we've got a store in there and everything else. But make the attempt, carve out the space, follow the letter, come back to us with this in November if it's agreeable to you guys.
And obviously, you're gonna have some sort of an intent, you'd like to have, obviously, you're not gonna have clients, but, we'd like to have this here, we'd like to have that there, we'd like to.
Leave the space in it. I mean, I can tell you, in Brockton, on Main Street, that big development there that they did, it's right up the street from my office. They left retail space in there. Eventually it got leased out. It was mostly residential, but now there's some retail in there. They're trying to get a restaurant in there. This is that big development that's on the other side of the train station, right in the main drag of Brockton. And granted, that's a city, it's a downtown. But they left the spaces in there. And my agency did the review on that, and so I'm not going to do the review on this. This is my portion of this is being a member of this board. But come back to us.
Yeah.
Show us that
No, we
you're
hear you,
committed to
and
this.
that's what we want to hear, and that's what the whole meeting was about. We want to, know what you want and get an idea and a sense, and, if there's any other comments or, anything else that you saw or, you'd like, let us know.
I think there definitely are some niche needs that could very easily be satisfied here. There isn't a place in this town to get a good cup of coffee that's not called Dunkin' Donuts or Honeydew. I mean, things like that.
3 Dunkin'
I
Donuts.
actually love the idea of a
on the corner
daycare.
of,
It's a Mary Lou's right around
Mary Lou,
the
Mary
corner
Lou's
from
is
your
great.
house.
I stand by what I said.
I have a curd machine.
Yeah, but
in my
there's in a
kitchen.
cafe, there's a place where you can sit and have a cup of coffee and get a bagel in this town, which is surprising. There was a place in the Abington Crossing when it first opened up, and it's closed since, or whatever the place was. I actually like the idea of a daycare. I think it blends nicely into what you're trying to do, but I understand it's a little traffic heavy. Yeah, I don't know what the traffic heavy uses are versus, it's not going to be a Buffalo Wild Wings, it's not going to be a chain restaurant, it's not going to be McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts, but I think there's some niche needs, especially considering everything that's going on around this area, that could fit nicely. I like the additional easement on the the west side of the property. I think that's an improvement. But what this boils down to is that we have a traffic problem on Summer Street. That's not your fault. It's going to get worse as everything comes online. And I think we would be not doing our job as the planning board if we didn't at least say, we need to have a conversation with the Board of Selectmen and the DPW in this town about how we're going to handle Summer Street moving forward. Because even if we don't approve this, we're still going to have a traffic problem on Summer Street.
Well, Old Colony Planning Council did a traffic study. I know because Ron saw me sitting outside his house. I counted those 3 intersections, Federal Street, So, right there, I personally did that, I live in town, okay, so I sat there for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night, and we have machines on those, traffic counting, road tubes on that stuff. You could talk to Bill McNulty in our office and go through those numbers. But no, we did a traffic, my other hat, I'm sorry, Old Colony Planning Council. I always be careful to say that I work for Old Colony Planning Council. But we actually did a traffic study on Summer Street. And I'm sure you guys must have done a traffic study.
We have one, and then there's a peer review coming on our traffic study. I guess they're doing a peer review on that,
So I've sat at all those intersections in my beach chair with my little counter, my count board, pointing north and I've been doing this sort of thing since 1985. I still get to do this stuff,
Drinking cream out of a Twinkie?
No, you don't drink anything because you can't go to the bathroom when you're sitting for 2.5 hours.
So, even if this doesn't happen, there's a traffic problem, there's a congestion problem on Summer Street, there's a speeding problem on Summer Street. It's going to get worse when the other 40B eventually gets approved and
We're not a 40B.
I know you're not.
Yeah.
I know you're not. When the development that's currently under construction across from this gets built, that's another 12 unit? 10 units, so 20 cars. So no matter what, the responsible thing for us as a planning board needs to be, we need to have a conversation with the Board of Selectmen about how we're going to address Summer Street. If we approve this, we definitely need to have a conversation about what we're going to do about Summer Street. And I have ideas, they're very amateur ideas, but we need to do something. We can't just...
You can't make it a cul-de-sac, Joe.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't work that way.
So I'm more than happy to, on behalf of the board, to reach out and start that conversation, but we need to do something. We can't approve this, reject this, without also taking consideration Summer Street as a holistically.
Again, Rick, I'll get that traffic study that we did, that Old Colony did, because I know the machines were out. When the traffic counters are out, they do speed, volume, classification. It isn't like the old days when you just did when I started out with machines that had the tape drives in them. That was...
When was that study done?
This summer.
This summer?
Yeah, I know, because...
Did they have any suggestions along with it?
This traffic...
Yeah, I'd like to, I can't have enough paper to write on, I guess. There's no conclusions, there's not even anything added up.
No, and that's by design, because generally speaking, the traffic study's in draft form while there's peer review going on.
So this is just the data?
Yeah, we provided the data to Beals and Thomas, because the traffic study wasn't part of the application. In towns where we have a traffic study as part of an application, then we'll finalize the report or put it in full draft form and then update it. Our intent here was to do it as a way to be proactive, because we knew traffic was going to come up, and provide the data so that Beals and Thomas or whoever their traffic engineer was could come back and start manipulating the data however they felt like. And then certainly Jack Gillen, who's been doing this for a long time, would finalize his report. I mean, my guess would be when you approve this, it would be subject to a finalization of the traffic.
Why wasn't there a count done actually on Summer Street? There was the exit going out onto Summer Street, but that doesn't take into consideration all the traffic coming off 18 or coming down from 58.
We had strips out on Summer and Plymouth.
At the intersection up top of the road?
Yeah, I actually counted that. I did an AM and PM count there, TMC, and I know the guys had machines on.
And I think he had machines at 18, and then at 18 in Summer, and then I asked him to do an additional one at Plymouth and Center, I believe.
I did all three of those four ways. I did 18, Summer and 18. I did Summer and 58. And I did the four-way down where the old center school is.
Yeah, because I didn't see this one. I didn't see the 18 in Summer Street one.
Oh yeah, that was Joyous County.
Yeah, because I think the assumption there is that where else are they going to come from, right?
Those were all busy intersections.
Yeah. So, and then this is the same traffic engineer that did 1050 Plymouth Street, which was the 40B. So there's the data was there. I mean, this was. I used him for that reason, because I knew that he had already had some.
So we have data somewhere that says this is how many cars are on Summer Street as a whole.
Between what these guys did and what Old Colony did, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's more than enough. I mean, we know that nobody's sitting in their driveway for a half an hour trying to get out. We know that. I know it feels like a half an hour. That's a conversation that constantly happens. But we know that people are waiting 2 light cycles, you know. But one of the conversations was, you know, at the traffic circle in Whitman, was that, you know, folks are, you know, just waiting forever down there. Well, you know, according to the traffic counts, that's not really the case.
I can't comment, but I mean, I saw this firsthand. When you're out there doing the AM peak hours, you can see, and it was a while ago, but I can remember, you know, what it was like. Because I sat there. When you're sitting there counting it and seeing it, it's another thing anecdotally, but to actually go out there and see it and do the work, which I did.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
I mean, some of the mitigation conversations that we had with the residents was to, you know, I mean, we wouldn't do this, but to provide mitigation funding to the town for a traffic light, if that was the town's wishes of DPWs through the state, to put one at Summer and Monahan's Way. There's concerns about backing up onto the train tracks, people stopping on train tracks.
Well, that's the concern that we had when we permitted the Dunkin' Donuts, you know, down in the corner of 58 and 123.
Well, they insisted they wouldn't back out to the street.
Yeah, well,
They promised.
that worked out.
So, I mean, but you can't widen Summer Street, and you can't add sidewalks. One thing we did offer, and again, I'm waiting to hear back from the engineers about this, is to provide either a walkway or a bridge off of Summer Street through the back of our property to the train station, which will alleviate some of the pedestrian traffic off of Summer Street that comes up and around.
I think if you did a signal warrant analysis at 18 in Summer and the four-way in the middle, I'm not sure it would warrant a light.
No, I mean, the traffic engineer said that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
Well, I had an old boss who always said that anyone who had a driver's license was a traffic engineer, which is, and he had the PE after his name, so he had to sign off on my work as a planner. But I don't think it would, personally, I don't think it would, and again, I'm not a traffic engineer, I was just a guy who did accounts, but I don't think a signal warrant analysis would prove a light was warranted.
yeah, I don't know how to combat it. I mean, this is a conversation I have in every town, and I mean, from here to, you know, Falmouth, Kentucky, a town of 600 people, and we're hearing that there's too much traffic, you know, and I think that's a conversation everywhere, and I think it's just an easy conversation for people to have. I think what we're doing here is making the counts and saying we're probably not going to significantly, you know, adversely affect that.
Well, you have to go by the engineering standards that's in the, what is it, the manifold uniform of traffic signals at the Monk Book. And these things have to, we do these studies, and we have to determine whether or not they warrant a light. Or you could be like Quincy, put stop signs around every block, which is crazy, drive around Quincy sometimes. But right now, it's a four-way stop at the intersection in the middle. It's a signalized at 58 in Summer, and then it's a stop sign on Summer Street going on to Bedford Street. So, I don't know.
Can I ask a procedural question? Because I'm just want to make sure we do the right thing. What I'm going to propose back to the architect, and we'll try and line up some retail space, is on the first floor, you know, taking a look at that. The second thing, though, is as soon as I have that done, get that submitted and just make 18 copies up and get that out to you?
Just make sure it's submitted in time for the November, you guys okay with
November meeting, yeah.
Because you really need to have a full board here.
Right.
Yeah, so just make sure that Mrs. Shea
Yep.
gets all this stuff in time.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, and it's the 18, you want the, we don't need to do a full application or anything else like that.
No,
Again,
no, we're
it's
gonna
just-
review
yeah,
this
yeah,
again.
Yeah, right.
Just
okay.
come back to us and, You know, it's not your job to make me happy, but it's your job to make.
No,
the
no,
board.
and we want a good project, and everybody wants a good project, and we want it, it's to last for, a long, long, long time, so.
So just come back, and pretend you actually read this. You know, like it's
Let me tell you something, we have gone through that bylaw every which way, and I could show you memos internally between the lawyers and back and forth, but trying to, sitting around a conference table, it's like, how do we balance the market with the bylaw? How do we balance the height?
Every town that you come into, you're gonna run into this deal that has a Todd. And, I can tell you, I wasn't on the board when this was passed, but I was at town meeting when this debated. And I was working as a planner, and I participated in the discussion. And people agreed, well, it prevented some really horrible things from happening down there. Because it's on top of a watershed and stuff like that down there. But, I understand.
One other element is, excuse me, Bruce, you just mentioned an element, if they're talking about a pedestrian bridge that would bring people down directly to there.
Well, they come down now.
They come down now.
And so what we heard in the meeting was, would you guys consider putting in a sidewalk down this area? Because right now, we have to come all the way down and around, and it would be a shortcut for us, and it would get people off of Summer Street. And that was kind of we thought that made some sense.
I kind of hoped that you'd see that much pedestrian traffic going through your development.
Well, I think it's the people that walk down there now to get to the train.
I've had to do counts at the train station, including pedestrian counts, and people who are walking
down
from
Summer.
the neighbor, yeah. And there are people who do that.
Yeah, so that, we thought it was we thought it was a good idea, and we thought, if we can make it work.
Marketing this as accessible to the train corridor, and with the enhancements that the MBTA has proposed, it's going to be all double-decker cars, and the improvements to South Station, and the governor's, they're going to actually throw some money at commuter rail, even though it's the most expensive option as opposed to rapid transit, but that's another conversation. But the income people that you're going to be appealing to will be using the commuter rail, I'm sure.
So the other balancing act here, which we'll try to figure out, is trying to meet the parking. So, we can add the commercial back in. I'm sure there's room there. But then the commercial, the need for commercial spaces. And also, 1-for-1 is nice, but from a property management standpoint, it may not be the most ideal, which is why we have 175 or 160 here on spaces. The more spaces we add, then we run into impervious surface.
How close to the edge of this does the parking for the MBTA lot start?
Well, it's right here.
Okay.
It's right on top of it.
Right on the other side of this fence.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's a short walk.
Yeah, and there's also, I think that's why I think the chairman's over here.
Because the Wolfville
parking
Wyman property
space
is
there,
right
there's a
there.
parking lot there. We're kind of limited over here because we have an easement to the, we have an MTA easement over here, so that can only be parking. It's a tricky space with also the amount of wetlands that have been created by that roadway being built through there. Those wetlands are not, some of them permanent, but not all of them. Some of them are kind of man-made.
5 o'clock at night, that parking lot's empty. 5:30 at night,
Right.
it's empty.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. So, if that was something that, if we can, stay within, we're trying to balance this thing without going to, if we go down to 20 units, it's not going to get built. Yeah, so.
Okay, does anyone else on the board have any comments?
Can I just have you changing it to November?
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to open this up.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Just if you can just initial it.
Okay.
I just want to open this up for a few public comments.
Thank you very much.
Sir?
David Smith, trustee for Center Avenue Realty Trust. As the plans that I've seen, we have a 50-foot easement. And I just would hope that would be addressed. Nothing's been addressed in the plans I've seen dumpsters on the easement, fence on the easement. It's my understanding. remaining on the film night.
Maybe we can talk afterwards. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, sure.
I just
Yep.
wanted to
Yeah, make sure
let
you're.
the board be aware and.
Yep,
so be done. Thank you.
absolutely, yep.
The 64 access and utility easement? Is that
That's the MBTA.
Oh, that's MBTA's.
It's right there. The dumpster, the
I know this
fence.
came up in the last, I know you raised this in the last issue
I don't know if we should be having a conversation about.
No, okay, that's all right, we'll just cut this off. This is such a personal, intimate group, if I can reach out to Deputy Chief Howe and his wife Pam sitting back there. You guys have anything to say about this?
Well, Pam Holland, 29 Walnut Street. I was at the beginning meeting of the selectmen's and also the meeting needed for the residents. And it seemed like both of those meetings, the number of units was like 160 something. And now I'm here at 175, which didn't even seem to be like that was the original. It was like 160 something. And residents were concerned about traffic. It is a concern. I mean, sometimes it does take me 10, 15 minutes to get out of my driveway.
Well, I counted right by your house, so.
Okay, but beside that, I mean, it was just, the residents had a real concern about the number of units and the other, Abington isn't built up, it's being built up. And they just felt like, you know, we don't need another huge unit in town. Although it is going in, we did agree, you know, yes, it is your property, you have the right to develop it. But there were other concerns, like you said, you can't put sidewalks on Summer Street. Why can't there be sidewalks put on Summer Street and not enough room? You know, that was a concern that people were walking to and from the, you know, the complex. And then you mentioned there's nothing around there. Well, there is. There's a convenience store right on the other side of the parking lot when you go out to the train station on, you know, Center Ave. And there's Dairy Queen you can walk to. There's Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, it's not that secluded that there isn't any commercial around it. And you talked about if you do put commercial, then you got to put another level on with, you know, what was going to be the residential. I think it's a great thing that you have a meeting with the residents. I felt kind of offended when you said, well, we're the ones that make the decision, not them.
Well, we are.
It affects us, though.
It affects you,
It
but
affects the whole town.
it wasn't meant to
So-
offend you, but this board has to make that decision.
Exactly.
It's not a
but
popular
I think
vote.
it's commendable of them to take our concerns and try to, you know, make the residents agree and accept this. Another big concern was just the woodlands, you know, that are out there. I mean, if you're gonna cut everything down, like people were saying, there's a lot of wildlife, you know, like you were saying you extended the 20-foot, you know, border between Progress Street. But you're still gonna cut it all down and landscape it, why can't you just leave the woods, you know? I mean, there were a lot of concerns, and I see you smiling, but it's a concern of the residents because they don't wanna look out their backyard and see a privacy fence, you know? I mean, it would be nice to have the, you know, and I think they're all valid concerns. You know, I know you're on the planning board, and that's what your thought process is, planning, build. But
Oh, it isn't
that's
that.
not what the residents are supporting.
No, it's not,
So it's commendable.
it's not build. It's, people present plans to us, and they have to conform with the rules and regulations, you know, the planning and zoning. And this is what we have to do. This isn't a build. We've denied stuff, but it's
I'm
just,
saying, this is,
yeah.
you know, they were trying to.
This is
they were
our task.
Trying to agree with the residents and come to some type of, you know, resolution, and just with the suggestions the residents had, and the traffic was a huge part of it.
And I will add that it's a 50, it's like 47 feet between the building and the Progress Street properties. 22 of those would be left unchanged, like most of this area, and that was from that resident meeting. And I anticipate that we'll have at least one more meeting when we, you know, and we go through we'll send a letter out to the residents and do what we can to get people there. But I think we'll have at least one more meeting, and those aren't easy because, you know, there's a lot of people who are upset, and so I think we're getting there. I mean, we're just
I mean, and I want to be respectful of everybody, you know, and try to get that.
Well, when they did the other project on Summer Street, again, they did public outreach. They did a lot of public outreach on that. So it's a process. We understand it. All right.
Just real quick, if I could say too, and you know, obviously we've been somewhat oppositional with this in the beginning, but I'm just doing my job, and you're.
Yeah, we're all, Chief,
Yeah.
you're doing your job, and
Exactly.
and we as a board, and me as acting chair, I'm just trying to go by the rules and regulations. That I can't make this stuff up. We have to go by the rules and regulations, and we have to live them.
What I was gonna say, to that extent, I think that they have, from some of the concerns at that last meeting we had downstairs a month ago, they did kind of redesign, they spaced some of the buildings apart more, from some of our suggestions. They are trying to make it work. It all boils down to it's a large project in a small congested space. That's the issue, I think, with this whole project.
Well, I mean, that's the thing always with Todd projects. The train stations attract traffic. It's a couple hundred feet or whatever it is, you know, it attracts, you're gonna attract people to the train station, but that also makes, the train station makes it attractive to developers, and the zoning, which allows the denser uses because it's in a Todd. These people wouldn't be coming before us if it wasn't attractive for them because of the density allowed and the trains that are gonna allow their potential tenants to live in their place and pay good rent so that they can utilize the T. So it's a lot of factors. All right, appreciate the comments. I would make a motion, and again, I explained my reasoning that I won't be able to be here in October. I would entertain a motion to continue this hearing to November 4th, which is our
Won't you say the November meeting?
November meeting, whatever the date is. If that's,
Should be
That's
the-
fine, sure,
should be
thank
the
you.
fourth,
Yeah,
but just
yeah.
in case.
if someone would make that motion.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone
Yeah.
who came out.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
You want your paperwork back, Chief?
Yes, please, thank
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
No.
Tentative subdivision on Katina Way, waivers to be granted.
So the last time we tried to do this, I couldn't find them on the plan, and I did find them on that plan, and they are exactly as written here.
What are you talking about?
Oh, these,
The waivers for Catena Way, and
Oh.
I did their decision letter, and they weren't voted separately. And then the last time, I pulled out the plan, and I couldn't find them on there,
Yeah.
but I did find them on there, and that's it. I thought about calling y'all back,
Oh, we'd love to hear from you, Mrs. Shea.
coming in to vote just that one
Yeah,
time.
sure.
What is your feeling? Do you want to grant all these waivers? Better, Bob?
No, but I can't see a reason not to.
I don't know what I did with mine.
I gave you my extra copy.
But we already discussed it, right?
Yeah.
Yes. That's what I thought.
But we didn't do it, I guess.
Again, I would just state for the record, the reason we're considering these is because this is a private drive and it will not be a public way.
It should be noted, I think it is noted on the plans, right? Is it?
I think it is.
But just for,
Making sure it's for the record, because I'd hate to have us eventually approve it.
otherwise, I would disagree with many of these. But
There's wetlands involved and everything else, Rick, that's the other problem.
although this is a bridge or a berm or something,
We discussed all that before.
Yeah.
We need a motion.
Motion made.
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Is there anything else we need?
I think so.
Motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made, seconded. All those in favor?
Good night, everyone.
I left everybody a copy of